7. This single, apparently harmless digit has driven us mad since the dawn of consciousness. It appears everywhere: religious and literary texts, celestial models, ancient architecture, and even our modern calendar and daily life. 7 days, 7 colors, 7 musical notes, 7 seals, 7 churches, 7 virtues, 7 deadly sins, 7 chakras, 7 liberal arts, 7 seas, 7 wonders of the ancient world, 7 ages of man, 7 classical planets. And then once you look above at the starry sky or heavens, and within your mind and other people's minds, you see that 7 is there again, always as an intrinsic pattern we can't really get rid of or truly understand. And it's hard to explain this territory completely in words, because it's so easy to fall into Nietzsche's abyss. It's so easy to be possessed by these archetypes, which are often incredibly powerful to the degree that you'll find it hard to recognize yourself anymore. It's very easy to get lost in the darkness, especially if it's your first rendezvous with the void. It will feel as if you entered a black hole, literally. Your soul will taste nothingness, and nothingness first dissolves everything you thought you knew about yourself. And this is such a terrible experience for anyone, any mortal, because it is suffocating. It tears you apart the same way Orpheus was ripped to pieces, the same way Dionysus was dismembered, cooked for breakfast, and eaten by the hungry titans. It's a psychological crucifixion. But now you are Jesus, and everything happens in your mind. And at the moment, we've just scratched the surface with number 7. Because we have the 7 archons, and 7 archangels, 7 Anunnaki. Jung writes the 7 sermons to the dead. Egyptians had their 7 Hathors, there are 7 sages, Greek and Hindu, the 7 sleepers of Ephesus. 7 hermetic governors, 7 Buddhas of antiquity. Illuminating, isn't it? And terrifying at the same time. While I'm reading what I just wrote, I realize this video will probably touch me gently with one hand and slap me with the other, but isn't this a necessary balance? Isn't this what philosophy is about? Isn't this what we should learn if we are the way the universe observes itself? Are not your synapses and the way planets and stars interact with each other in the universe, and the way we humans bond with each other, and the way quantum particles get entangled evidence that it is in the links, the patterns, the fractals, the connections, the ties, the bridges, the chains, the overlaps, that you find the meaning of the universe, which, as above, so below, is also highly relevant for your personal meaning and how you should conduct yourself in life? I say yes, and I promise you it will change you. And 7 is one humble step toward it. Why does 7 hold such power over our imagination? What truths might it reveal? What is 7? Good questions, dear Watson. This is a pattern too consistent to ignore. This isn't random. Where do you think you live? In the wilderness? No, dear friend. Everything is ordered and interconnected. Consider this first. Contemporary research in cognitive science has identified 7, plus or minus 2, as the typical limit of working memory. The number of distinct elements consciousness can simultaneously process, as established by George Miller's influential 1956 paper, The Magical Number 7, plus or minus 2. An empirical finding suggesting that some sevenfold structures may relate to fundamental cognitive capacities. So, are we witnessing independent discoveries of some fundamental cosmic structure? The transmission of ancient wisdom across continents and millennia? Or is there something about our cognition that naturally organizes the universe into groups of 7? Let's see if we can find some answers. I am a revelator. I reveal the secrets you deserve to know, the lives and stories of luminaries and gods, the symbols that possess our minds, the interdisciplinary fractals, the flame of Prometheus, the apple, the keys, the hidden and subtle connections between everything and everyone. Walk with me into the vibrant and creative constellations of 7 like a human searching for his soul, and listen carefully. You never know when your next spiritual journey begins, but remember that it is always your path, and that path can't be taught by anyone. It is you who have to live that path. If you are new here, welcome. Take a seat and get comfortable. It's usually a hell of a ride. To old and new friends, my heartfelt appreciation. Thank you for being here. If you find value in these explorations, remember that I'm doing this because I love what I'm doing and I'm obsessed with it. I don't throw courses or sponsors in your face, and I don't have any agenda other than trying to push you to ask yourself questions, think, be independent, be free, be curious, and have a life you are madly in love with. I want to remind you that your voice is just as important as mine. Your life is just as important as mine. You are just as important as I am. How can I promise you that? Because I'm not making these videos for you primarily. This is my path, and you are invited to observe and experience some things together. Because our streets may intersect, but ultimately they are different streets. Made out of the same substance, yes, but everyone is meant to individuate in their own unique way. At least potentially. You have to start doing the work your soul or your intuition tells you is your birthright to master. Because it's there when you realize you don't have time to be bored and boring. With all due respect, but excessive rest is for dead people. You need motion. Support this channel only if you think it's worth it. I don't want to become a millionaire on your backs, yet I would enjoy being able to live decently from doing what I love, so I can continue doing it, because I'm on my own now. What would make me happiest, however, is if these videos truly make a difference in your lives. I can't unfluff anyone's life, but you see, it's usually the case that all the answers were already inside you. I know this sounds like a cliché, but it's not. My presence here is not to offer you dogma, although we will examine some, but to create cracks in what you thought was unmovable in your mind. Why? To make us stronger, of course. You'll find additional resources and support options in the description. Now let's begin with the most ancient manifestation of the cosmic seven. The planets visible to the naked eye, the wandering stars, whose movements first inspired our ancestors to look up and wonder about the forces governing our universe. The idea of an ascent through the seven spheres of the planets symbolizes the return of the soul to the sun god from whom it originated, writes Carl Jung in Psychology and Alchemy, with a touch of stardust and ancient Neoplatonic cosmology. Consider, if you will, when ancient eyes tracked seven wanderers against the fixed stars. They observed Sol, Luna, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Today, these are simply some stuff up above their heads they never get to see because they are sucked in by their homes and internet connections. Most individuals never taste the true splendor and awe of the celestial spheres. How could they? A box will always make the universe look uglier than it is. The more basic the box, the more blurry their perceptions of the universe become. Modern science and astronomy are amazing, don't get me wrong, but where are the other angles? Why are we not writing poems and odysseys and dialogues and hymns like they used to be? Where is astrology? Where is alchemy? Have we forgotten the treasures of imagination and the unconscious? When ancients looked at the sky at astral bodies, they saw cosmic intelligences choreographing the dance of existence. The Chaldean oracles of Zoroaster described planets as fountains and principles that whirl round and always remain in a ceaseless revolution, while Iamblichus and later Neoplatonists viewed them as manifestations of divine power in visible form. Modern astronomy, with its telescopic revelations of Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and countless other celestial bodies, has expanded our cosmic vision immensely. Yet this expansion may obscure a profound truth. Those seven visible planets formed a complete cosmological system in the pre-telescopic mind. A perfect cosmology reflecting what many ancient philosophers considered the sevenfold structure of consciousness. Today's astronomical discoveries show Saturn and Jupiter having hundreds of moons, far more than ancient observers could have imagined. Yet despite these numerical expansions and our growing awareness of cosmic complexity, the classical seven retain their archetypal significance across cultural traditions. The evidence for this continued significance appears throughout our modern world. Our 7-day week remains organized around these planetary names: Saturday Saturn, Sunday Sun, Monday Moon, etc. These 7 planets still form the foundation of traditional astrological systems practiced worldwide, and they continue to influence arts, literature, and symbolic systems from poetry to psychology. Thus, could these celestial bodies actually correspond to fundamental patterns in our perception and experience that transcend astronomical observation? The answer lies partly in what Ptolemy's Tetrabiblos, the foundational text of Western astrology, established in the 2nd century. Here, Ptolemy, a mathematician, astronomer and geographer, among other titles, provides a systematic framework linking planetary influences to the stages of human life in a passage that deserves close examination. Ptolemy writes, "The mode of consideration applicable to human nature is universally one and the same, and it is analogous to the arrangement of the 7 planetary orbs. It, therefore, duly commences with the first age of human life, and the first sphere next above the earth, that of the moon, and it terminates with the final age of man, and the last of the planetary spheres, which is that of Saturn. And in fact, it accordingly happens that the appropriate qualities of each sphere take effect in a corresponding age of life, each age being subjected to one particular sphere." This passage establishes Ptolemy's core principle. Human development follows a pattern that mirrors the cosmic order of the 7 planetary spheres. Rather than arbitrary correspondences, he proposes a natural relationship between macrocosm and microcosm, between cosmic structures and human experience. This perspective doesn't require supernatural belief, but instead suggests fundamental patterns that connect celestial movements to psychological development. The same way everything is interconnected and emerging from the same intelligent substance. As above, so below. Ptolemy continues, "These observations are necessary because the general divisions of time must be considered by means of the spheres as a primary arrangement, although minor distinctions are to be made by means of the existing peculiarities found in nativities." Here, Ptolemy distinguishes between universal patterns, the general influence of planets on life stages, and individual variations, the specific configurations at birth. This nuanced approach acknowledges both collective human experience and personal uniqueness, a sophisticated psychological model that anticipates modern developmental psychology, balances universal stages and individual differences. Ptolemy then maps each planetary sphere to a specific life stage, beginning with the moon. Hence, the first age of infancy, which endures for 4 years, agreeing in number with the quadrennial period of the moon, is consequently adapted to her, being in its nature moist and incompact, presenting rapidity of growth, being nourished by moist things, and possessing a highly variable habit. Its mental incompleteness is likewise in accordance with its familiar relation to the moon and her operative influence. The correspondence between lunar qualities, moisture, variability, rapid cycles, and infant development shows remarkable observational insight. Modern developmental psychology confirms infancy's rapid growth, changing states and fluid boundaries, qualities Ptolemy intuitively associated with the moon's nature. He continues through childhood. The age after this continues for 10 years and accommodates itself to the second sphere, that of Mercury. In this period, the intellectual and reasoning faculties of the mind begin to take their character, imbibing the seeds of learning and developing, as it were, the elements and germs of the genius and abilities and their peculiar quality. The mind is also roused to discipline and instruction and to its first exercises. The mercurial period aligns with what we now call middle childhood, ages 4–14, when language development, logical thinking, and formal education become the primary focus. Mercury's traditional associations with communication, learning, and mental agility provide an apt metaphor for this developmental stage. Adolescence follows under Venus. Venus corresponds with the next and third age, which lasts throughout the following 8 years, the number of her own period. From her, the movement of the seminal vessels originates, as well as an unrestrained impetuosity and precipitancy in amours. With characteristic directness, Ptolemy acknowledges adolescence's sexual awakening and emotional intensity. The Venusian qualities of desire, attraction, and relationship formation accurately capture this turbulent life stage. Ages 14–22. Young adulthood falls under the sun's governance. The fourth and adult age next succeeds and is subject to the fourth sphere, that of the sun. It endures for 19 years according to the sun's number. Authority of action now commences in the mind, the career of life is entered upon, distinction and glory are desired, and puerile irregularities are relinquished for more orderly conduct and the pursuit of honor. This solar period, ages 22-41, encompasses career establishment, identity consolidation, and the pursuit of recognition. Qualities fittingly associated with the sun's symbolic role as the center of identity and vitality. Middle age comes under Mars' influence. Mars, next after the sun, claims the fifth age, that of manhood, agreeing in duration with his own period, namely 15 years. He induces greater austerity of life, together with vexation, care and trouble. Thus the Martian phase, ages 41-56, acknowledges midlife's challenges and struggles, or what modern psychology might call the midlife crisis or transition. Mars' qualities of conflict, assertion and endurance symbolize the often demanding nature of this period. Mature adulthood belongs to Jupiter, as Jupiter occupies the sixth sphere and influences the maturer age during the 12 years corresponding to his own period. He operates the relinquishment of labor, of hazardous employment and tumult, and produces greater gravity, foresight, prudence and sagacity, favoring the claim to honor, respect and privilege. The Jovian stage, ages 56-68, reflects later adulthood's increased wisdom, social standing, and transition from striving to mentoring, qualities traditionally associated with Jupiter's beneficence and authority. Finally, old age falls to Saturn. Saturn, moving in the last sphere, regulates the final old age as agreeing with its chilliness. He obstructs the mental movements, the appetites and enjoyments, rendering them imbecile and dull, in conformity with the dullness of his own motion. The Saturnian period, ages 68 onward, acknowledges the physical limitations of aging with Ptolemy's characteristic bluntness, yet also implies Saturn's traditional associations with contemplation, boundaries, and enduring wisdom, which are fitting. Ptolemy concludes with a sophisticated observation about how these planetary influences operate simultaneously through different channels. The common properties attributable to the various times of life are subject, in a general manner, to this previous adaptation. But there are particular periods, arising from the respective peculiarities of nativities, which also require determination and must be ascertained from the ruling prorogations. That is to say, from the whole of them, and not from any single one only, as in the case of the duration of life. For example, prorogation made from the ascendant is to be applied to events affecting the body and to traveling or change of residence. That from the part of fortune to incidents affecting the substance or wealth. That from the moon to actions of the mind and to communion and cohabitation. That from the sun to dignities and glory. And that from the mid-heaven to other particular circumstances of life, such as employment, friendship, and the possession of children. This passage reveals the depth of Ptolemy's psychological understanding. Different celestial points govern different life domains: physical health, material resources, emotional life, social status, and career, creating a multidimensional model of human experience that anticipates modern psychology's recognition of life's complexities. His final insight acknowledges life's contradictions, so that thus at one and the same time any single planet, whether benefic or malefic, will not possess the sole dominion. For many conflicting events frequently occur at the same period, and a person may at one and the same time lose a kinsman yet inherit his substance, or be at once ill in health yet prosperous and advantageously established in regard to fortune, or be struggling with adversity and in want yet notwithstanding be also a father and beget children. Or he may experience other similar contrarieties, because individuals are subject to occurrences which may affect either the body, the mind, the rank, or the condition of wealth, and which are not altogether fortunate or unfortunate at the same period. Ptolemy makes an observation that demonstrates remarkable psychological sophistication, recognizing that humans simultaneously experience different influences in different life domains. One might face physical illness while achieving financial success, or personal loss alongside new beginnings. Ptolemy's model isn't simplistic, but accommodates life's complex, often contradictory nature. Your initial settings are not your final destiny. He concludes with a balanced perspective on human experience, writing, "Something of the kind will, however, frequently happen in cases of perfect good fortune or distress, when meetings of all the benefics or malefics may concur in all or most of the prorogations. Still, such cases are but rare, because human nature in general is not subjected to the extremity either of good or evil, but rather to their moderate alteration and counterchange." Finally, Ptolemy reveals his empirical wisdom. Extreme fortune or misfortune remains rare, because life typically involves mixed experiences and ongoing cycles of change rather than permanent states. What makes Ptolemy's seven-stage model so remarkable isn't its neat correspondence between planets and life stages, but its psychological depth. He wasn't simply imposing arbitrary cosmic patterns onto human experience, but observing genuine developmental rhythms and expressing them through the symbolic language of his time. And this sevenfold structure captures the progression of psychological growth with remarkable precision, despite our expanded astronomical knowledge. This may explain why these planetary archetypes continue to exist across cultures and eras. They reappear in patterns of human development that transcend the specific cosmological models that first articulated them. These mathematical relationships were central to Pythagoras and his followers, who discerned the mathematical basis of musical intervals and extended this principle to celestial motion. For Pythagoras, 7 was a sacred number, linked to the 7 classical planets, the 7 strings of a lyre, and the celebrations of Apollo on the 7th day of each month. The music of the spheres concept proposed that the same mathematical proportions governing musical harmony also structured planetary orbits. Each planet or sphere produced a specific tone based on its orbital distance and speed. Together, these 7 tones created the cosmic octave, the universal harmony normally inaudible to human ears. Kepler declared himself a Pythagorean and believed in and was inspired by Pythagoras' harmony of the spheres. Later, he published Harmonices Mundi, translated Harmony of the World, in which he proposed that musical intervals and harmonies can describe the elliptic motions of planets. Thus, he writes, "I grant you that no sounds are given forth, but I affirm that the movements of the planets are modulated according to harmonic proportions." But unlike Pythagoras, Kepler did not claim to hear the harmony of the spheres with his ears, but he believed the soul could hear it. Cicero relates in his Dream of Scipio this concept through the character of Scipio Africanus, who explains the cosmic music. That is the concord of tones, separated by unequal but nevertheless carefully proportioned intervals, caused by the rapid motion of the spheres themselves. The high and low tones blended together produce different harmonies. The Roman gods lent their names to these celestial bodies, each embodying distinct qualities. Saturn, Kronos, with his restrictive gravitas. Jupiter, Zeus, with his expansive authority. Mars, Ares, with his assertive energy. Sol, Helios Apollo, with his illuminating consciousness. Venus Aphrodite, with her harmonizing beauty. Mercury Hermes, with his communicative intelligence. Luna Selene Artemis, with her reflective intuition. These planetary energies were understood to flow through human experience. The 15th century philosopher Marsilio Ficino wrote in his 3 books on life that the planets themselves do not affect us as much through their rays as through their ensouled light, which is full of their properties. This understanding offered a philosophical framework where psychological qualities correlated with cosmic forces without requiring literal supernatural intervention. The 7-day week preserves this ancient understanding in our modern calendar. Sunday honors the sun, Monday celebrates the moon, Tuesday commemorates Mars through Tiau, Wednesday venerates Mercury through Woden, Thursday exalts Jupiter through Thor, Friday glorifies Venus through Frigga, and Saturday pays tribute to Saturn directly. All of them are part of a planetary framework embedded in our calendar system, revealing a profound cultural persistence. Germanic peoples adapted the Roman planetary gods to their own deities with a remarkable correspondence. Tuesday honors Tu or Tyr, the one-handed Norse god of war and justice, whose courage and sacrifice reflected Mars's martial qualities. Wednesday commemorates Woden or Odin, the wandering wisdom bringer and psychopomp, whose knowledge-seeking and transformative nature align perfectly with Mercury. Thursday celebrates Thor, the thunder wielder, whose domain of authority and protective power parallels Jupiter's rulership. And Friday enshrines Frigga or Freya, whose associations with love, beauty, and fertility mirror Venus in all her splendor. When we casually reference the days of the week, we unconsciously invoke this ancient cosmology, keeping alive a sevenfold rhythm first established by Babylonian astrologers, refined by Hellenistic astronomers, institutionalized by Roman administrators, adapted by Germanic tribes, and preserved through Christian and Islamic civilizations despite their theological departures from paganism. Perhaps most remarkably, this sevenfold division of time has withstood scientific revolution, calendar reforms, industrial standardization, and digital transformation. While we have decimalized currency, measurement, and countless other systems, the 7-day week remains inviolable, like a living testament to the deep psychological resonance of this planetary pattern that transcends practical utility. There's a maxim in astrology, often attributed to Ptolemy or Paracelsus, that captures the nuanced relationship between celestial influence and human agency. It goes like this: the stars incline, they do not compel. This reminds us that we are free despite planetary influence while preserving human freedom. We live at the threshold between determinism and free will. And then there's another maxim that encapsulates humanity's relationship with celestial forces: Sapiens dominabitur astris, a Latin phrase traditionally attributed to Ptolemy, but likely synthesized from the Centiloquium and Abu Mashar al-Balkhi's works. While often translated as "the wise one will rule the stars," its original context suggests the wise one will rule through the stars. A crucial distinction. This is not about dominating celestial bodies, but mastering their knowledge to navigate destiny. The phrase emerged in the late 13th century, walking on the same delicate line between astrological determinism and human agency. For astrologers, it affirmed the power of celestial knowledge, and for theologians, it validated free will over fatalism. Human wisdom was always the decisive factor. Through understanding cosmic patterns, we gain not control over the stars themselves, but mastery over their effects in our lives, transforming potential fate into conscious choice. Sapiens dominabitur astris suggests that knowledge of patterns, cycles, and cosmic rhythms grants not just prediction, but agency. The wise person doesn't resist celestial forces, but works with them, much as Ptolemy's model shows humans navigating life stages through understanding planetary qualities. This is the ultimate synthesis of cosmic knowledge and human wisdom. The stars may chart potential paths, but it is human consciousness that chooses which to walk. Why 7? The Mesopotamian ziggurats had 7 levels representing these planetary spheres. Solomon's temple contained 7 pillars according to Proverbs. The Mithraic mysteries featured 7 gates corresponding to planets. The 7th day brought divine rest in Genesis. Menorah candles numbered 7. The Book of Revelation addressed 7 churches and revealed 7 seals. This persistent sevenfold pattern reflects both astronomical fact, 7 visible planets, and psychological structure. The ancient Hermetic maxim, "as above, so below," suggested a correspondence between cosmic and psychological patterns. A philosophical superposition that doesn't require literal causation to offer meaningful insights into human experience. Certain mathematical properties of 7 may contribute to its significance. Unlike 6, a perfect number, or 8, a power of 2, 7 stands apart as a prime number that divides no perfect number. It neither resolves completely into simpler factors nor extends cleanly into higher structures. 7 thus represents a complete system that transcends simple reduction or expansion. Medieval cathedrals often encoded planetary symbolism in their architecture, with 7 branched floor plans representing the cosmic temple. Notre Dame's labyrinth contained 7 circuits that could be interpreted as corresponding to planetary orbits, transforming physical walking meditation into cosmic pilgrimage. Dante's Divine Comedy structured purgatory into 7 terraces corresponding to the 7 deadly sins, which had various associations with planetary influences in medieval thought. This cosmological structure reflected the medieval understanding of planetary qualities and their relationship to human character. Carl Jung observed in his psychological studies that the number 7 frequently appears in dreams and myths at moments of transformation. In psychology and alchemy, he noted, among others, that the idea of an ascent through the 7 spheres of the planets symbolizes the return of the soul to the sun god from whom it originated. Jung's observation here recognizes the profound spiritual journey encoded in ancient cosmology. This planetary ascent represents the soul's path to wholeness, what Jung termed individuation. In Neoplatonic and Hermetic traditions, the soul descends through these spheres at birth, acquiring qualities from each planet, and must reascend to return to its divine source. Jung saw this as a symbolic representation of psychological integration, where fragmented aspects of consciousness reunite with their source. The journey through planetary spheres mirrors the psyche's process of confronting and integrating different archetypal energies. In another passage, Jung writes that, in the language of initiation, 7 stands for the highest stage of illumination and would therefore be the coveted goal of all desire. Thus, Jung identifies how ancient mystery traditions encoded psychological transformation in numerical symbolism. The 7th stage represents the culmination of spiritual development, where a complete integration of consciousness occurs. From Eleusinian mysteries to Mithraic rites, initiation followed sequential stages, each unveiling deeper truths. That 7 marked completion reflects its psychological significance as representing wholeness. Jung noted that this pattern emerges spontaneously in dreams during pivotal psychological breakthroughs, suggesting the number 7 corresponds to an innate template for transformation in the human psyche, appearing at moments when consciousness achieves new levels of integration. He later continues, stating that the historical sous-entendu of the 7 is the antique company of 7 gods who later took up their abode in the 7 metals of alchemy. Jung's reference to alchemy reveals how deeply the planetary septenary penetrated material science and psychological practice. Each metal corresponded to a planet: gold, sun; silver, moon; Mercury; copper, Venus; iron, Mars; tin, Jupiter; and lead, Saturn. Alchemical operations were psychological processes encoded in material symbolism. The transformation of base metals into gold paralleled the integration of disparate psychological elements into unified consciousness. Jung recognized that alchemists were working simultaneously with physical substances and psychological projections, making visible the invisible work of psychic transformation. And does not this connection between planets, metals, and psychological states demonstrate the remarkable coherence of the sevenfold system across multiple domains of human experience? Finally, Jung writes, originally, the 7 stars were the 7 great Babylonian gods, but at the time of Enoch's revelation, they had become the 7 archons, rulers of this world, fallen angels condemned to punishment. In Jung's view, 7 maintains its psychological power, even as cultural interpretations evolve dramatically. The transformation from benevolent Babylonian deities to Gnostic archons, oppressive cosmic rulers, reflects a profound shift in humanity's relationship with cosmic forces. Jung recognized that these 7 figures, whether gods or fallen angels, represent first and foremost archetypal forces structuring our experience. The archons particularly fascinated Jung as psychological symbols, embodying patterns of thought and perception that both limit and define consciousness. An evolution that shows how the sevenfold pattern persists despite radical reinterpretations, suggesting it maps something fundamental in the human psyche. The 7 classical planets offer a framework for understanding both cosmic order and psychological experience, a system that doesn't require supernatural belief to provide meaningful insights about our existence and minds. Whether interpreted literally as divine intelligences or metaphorically as psychological principles, these 7 wandering stars have structured human understanding for millennia, offering a pattern of completeness that transcends cultural and historical boundaries. But we are not done yet. In fact, this is just the beginning. Now let's go a little bit deeper into the Forest of 7 and meet the archons. While the 7 planets provided our ancestors with visible cosmic forces moving through the heavens, these wandering stars became personified across cultures as divine beings with distinct personalities, powers, and domains. A transformation from astronomical bodies to deities. Isn't it amazing how deeply the sevenfold pattern penetrated spiritual understanding across civilizations? Even if you don't believe in this stuff, how fractalized this number is. In Gnostic tradition, those cosmic forces took the form of the 7 archons, powerful but often malevolent rulers who governed the planetary spheres. The word archon itself comes from the Greek archon, meaning ruler or lord. According to texts like the Apocryphon of John, these beings were created by Yaldabaoth, the demiurge who fashioned the material world as an imperfect copy of the spiritual realm. Number 7 appears again, as the Apocryphon states, Yaldabaoth. This is the first archon who took a great power from his mother, and he removed himself from her and moved away from the places in which he was born. He became strong and created for himself other eons with a flame of luminous fire, which still exists now. And he joined with his arrogance, which is in him, and begot authorities for himself. The name of the first one is Athoth, whom the generations called the Reaper. The second one is Harmas, who is the Eye of Envy. The third one is Kalila Umbri. The fourth one is Yabal. The fifth one is Adonaiu, who is called Sabaoth. The sixth one is Cain, whom the generations of men call the Sun. The seventh is Abel. The eighth is Abrisene. The ninth is Yobel. The 10th is Almupiel. The 11th is Melser-Adonain. The 12th is Belias. It is he who is over the depth of Hades. And he placed 7 kings, each corresponding to the firmaments of heaven, over the 7 heavens, and 5 over the depth of the abyss, that they may reign. Isn't this a terrifying thought, that the material world we inhabit is an imperfect prison created by a blind God, that our bodies and minds are cages designed by cosmic jailers? What if the light we're told to seek is actually the source of our imprisonment? What if the forces we worship are the architects of our limitation? But there's more. In the Gnostic text, On the Origin of the World, we learn that these 7 rulers emerged from chaos as androgynous beings with both masculine and feminine names. 7 appeared in chaos as androgynous beings. They have their masculine name and their feminine name. The feminine name of Yaldabaoth is forethought Sambathus, which is the weak. His son is called Yao, and his feminine name is lordship. Sabaoth's feminine name is divinity. Adonaios' feminine name is kingship. Eloios' feminine name is envy. Orios' feminine name is wealth. Astaphios' feminine name is Sophia. These are the 7 powers of the 7 heavens of chaos, and they came into being as androgynous beings according to the immortal pattern that existed before them and in accord with the will of Pistis, so that the likeness of what existed from the first might rule until the end. Isn't it mind-blowing that these ancient texts reveal such psychological sophistication? First, each cosmic ruler possesses both masculine and feminine aspects, a concept that modern psychology would take millennia to rediscover with Jung's Anima and Animus. And notice how Sophia, divine wisdom herself, appears as the feminine counterpart to Astaphios. Even in this seemingly oppressive cosmic system, wisdom remains present, though hidden. What's even more fascinating is that Yaldabaoth's feminine name is Sambathus, explicitly connected to the week, directly linking the 7-day cycle to these cosmic powers. The planetary week isn't just a convenient timekeeping system. It's encoded in the very structure of the demiurgic powers that govern material existence. These names might sound like something from a fantasy novel. And let's be honest, if George Martin had included them in Game of Thrones, we wouldn't have batted an eye. But to the Gnostics, these were the names of the cosmic wardens whose influence had to be overcome for spiritual liberation. Imagine being so convinced of this reality that you'd risk execution by Roman authorities to preserve these teachings. For Gnostics, these teachings were urgent truths upon which salvation depended. What makes the Gnostic understanding so psychologically sophisticated is that these archons were both external deities and internal forces structuring human consciousness. They represented patterns of thought, perception, and behavior that both enable and limit our experience. To transcend their influence was to recognize their nature, which is none other than transforming unconscious compulsion into conscious choice. And isn't this what psychological work is all about? Recognizing the forces that govern your behavior, the patterns that possess you, the archetypes that speak through you when you're not conscious, when they possess you. Have you ever caught yourself repeating the same self-destructive patterns, as if some alien force were pulling your strings? Or felt trapped in thought structures you didn't consciously choose? Perhaps the Gnostics weren't so crazy after all. This transformation from astronomical objects to personified deities occurred across cultures with remarkable consistency. In Mesopotamia, the 7 Anunnaki were supreme deities associated with the planets. This transformation from astronomical objects to personified deities occurred across cultures with remarkable consistency. In Mesopotamian tradition, we find another powerful expression of the sevenfold pattern. The Babylonians and Sumerians developed a sophisticated astronomical system where 7 major deities were associated with heavenly bodies. As documented in cuneiform texts, these deities and their planetary associations included Sin, moon. The Akkadian moon god evolved from the Sumerian Nana, governing fertility and prosperity. Sama, sun, evolved from Sumerian Utu, the god of justice and light. Nergal, Mars, the fierce god of plague, famine, war, and the underworld. Marduk, Jupiter, the chief Babylonian deity who replaced the Sumerian Enlil as god of air and earth. Nabu, Mercury, the god of wisdom and writing, sometimes considered the savior or redeemer. Ishtar, Venus, evolved from Sumerian Inanna, the complex goddess of both love and war. And Ninurta, Saturn, the god of war and hunting. The divine 7 appears repeatedly in Mesopotamian mythology. The Sabiti, or 7 who decree, were powerful judges associated with the Pleiades constellation, mentioned in Babylonian incantation texts like the Utuku Lemnutu. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, 7 sages or demigods, Apkallu, brought civilization to humanity before the flood. And in the Babylonian ritual text Maklu, 7 evil demons are invoked as destructive forces against which protection was sought. Seriously, take a moment to appreciate the cosmic audacity here. Imagine believing that writing. The technology that made civilization possible was a direct gift from Nabu, the Mercury deity. Or that metalworking came from specific divine intervention rather than through trial and error. Our ancestors didn't see themselves as clever apes who figured things out. They saw themselves as recipients of cosmic intelligence transmitted through planetary messengers. How much more magnificent is that vision than our modern materialism? Are you noticing anything yet? The connections, the echoes? The way 7 keeps appearing as if it's stitched into the fabric of consciousness? The Judeo-Christian tradition developed its own celestial hierarchy with the 7 archangels, though traditions vary on their exact identities. The concept appears most explicitly in the deuterocanonical book of Tobit, where Raphael reveals himself as one of the 7 angels who stand in the glorious presence of the Lord, ready to serve him. Tobit chapter 12, verse 15. While not mentioned directly in the Hebrew Bible, references in Zechariah chapter 4, verse 10 to 7, rejoices that are the eyes of the Lord, which scan to and from throughout the whole earth, and in Revelation chapter 8, verse 2 to 7 angels who stand before God, have been interpreted as supporting this tradition. Different Christian denominations recognize different archangels. In the Catholic Church, only 3 archangels are officially venerated by name: Michael, Gabriel, and Raphael, as these are the only ones explicitly named in their biblical canon. The Eastern Orthodox Church and Eastern Catholic churches of the Byzantine tradition recognize a richer tradition, venerating Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Selathiel or Salathiel, Jegudiel or Jehudiel, and Barachiel, and sometimes an 8th, Jeremiel or Jeremiel. In the Coptic Orthodox tradition, the 7 archangels are named as Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Suriel, Zadkiel, Sarathiel, and Ananiel. And right at the beginning of the Revelations, we find that there are also 7 spirits. Grace and peace to you from He who is, and who was, and who is still to come, and from the 7 spirits who are before His throne, and from Jesus Christ, the faithful witness, the firstborn from the dead, and the ruler of the kings of the earth. And there are several references to the seven spirits. The manifestations of the Holy Spirit, or maybe it's simply the same seven deities. The Book of Enoch, canonical in the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church, provides another list. Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, Raguel, Sarachael, and Remiel. These seven were described as those who in antediluvian times interceded on behalf of mankind against the rogue spirits known as the Watchers. Isn't it fascinating how religions that loudly proclaimed the worship of one supreme God still felt compelled to populate their cosmologies with sevenfold celestial bureaucracies? It's as if monotheism couldn't quite satisfy the human need for diverse divine personalities, as if seven were the irreducible minimum number of cosmic principles needed to explain reality. Even when trying to escape the influences of paganism, the sevenfold pattern refused to be erased. Have you noticed how these angelic hierarchies mirror administrative structures in human governments? We create celestial bureaucracies that reflect our earthly ones, or perhaps it's the other way around. Maybe our institutional structures unconsciously replicate cosmic patterns we intuitively sense. Either way, these seven messengers between heaven and earth continue to appear everywhere, preserving that magical number seven as a bridge between divine unity and material multiplicity. And we're not done yet. In ancient Egyptian mythology, alongside the individual goddess Hathor, appeared a mysterious multiplied form known as the Seven Hathors. These divine women embodied a unique aspect of Hathor's nature, her ability to perceive fate and future events. The Egyptians sometimes described these seven Hathors as distinct beings, a sisterhood of diviners, who appeared at crucial moments to pronounce destiny. According to Egyptian texts, the seven Hathors were often depicted as a set of seven cows, sometimes accompanied by a celestial bull called the Bull of the West. This image appears in chapter 148 of the Book of the Dead, where the deceased addresses these divine bovines by name, seeking their protection and nourishment in the afterlife. Each cow bore her own name and distinctive markings, yet together they formed a unified divine presence. What makes the seven Hathors particularly fascinating is their role in Egyptian literature. In two famous New Kingdom tales, the tale of two brothers and the tale of the doomed prince, these mysterious beings appear at the births of major characters to pronounce their fates. Like the three fates of Greek mythology or the Norns of Norse tradition, they arrive at decisive moments to declare how a person will die. In The Tale of the Doomed Prince, they proclaim that the newborn prince will meet his end either by a crocodile, a snake, or a dog. Yet the Egyptian understanding of fate wasn't entirely deterministic. In The Tale of the Doomed Prince, we see the protagonist actively working to escape his destiny. Though the ending is lost to us, surviving portions suggest he manages to avoid at least one of his prophesied deaths with divine assistance. This reflects a nuanced view of fate, not as an inescapable prison, but as a powerful pattern that might, with sufficient wisdom and divine favor, be at least partially transcended. A fascinating aspect of the seven Hathors is that they weren't always the same seven forms of the goddess. Different regions and temples of Egypt honored different groupings of Hathors. According to historical records, the seven Hathors worshipped at Dendera were Hathor of Thebes, Hathor of Heliopolis, Hathor of Aphroditopolis, Hathor of the Sinaitic Peninsula, Hathor of Memphis Amu, Hathor of Heracleopolis, and Hathor of Keset. But other texts mention different groupings. The Litany of the Hathors mentions the Hathors of Tepahet, Mafek, and Thebes, Thebes again, Nebt-Hetep, Suten-Hanen, Memphis, and Shea-Tesliah. This suggests that each major region likely had its own selection of seven Hathors, reflecting local traditions and connections. Perhaps most significant was their appearance in the Book of the Dead, where they took the form of seven divine cows accompanied by a celestial bull. In chapter 148, these celestial bovines are addressed by name, with the deceased seeking their protection and nourishment in the afterlife. The seven sacred cows bore the following names: Het cow Nebterche, Akert Kentetsts, Kebi Tetsanata, Urmertusteshert Chenti, Kernemte Mankanuit, Sek Metren Semabats, Shenat Petuthes Neta. Their celestial bull was named Kathaihempt, sometimes called Bull of the West. These names, while difficult to translate with absolute certainty, contain profound cosmic and divine significance. Even from the fragments we can understand, these names reveal celestial beings of extraordinary power. Words like Het, meaning temple or sacred house, Neb signifying lordship, Ka referring to the vital spirit force, Neta denoting divinity itself, Ankh embodying life eternal, and expressing greatness, all these elements mixed into their names show these are no ordinary entities. Thus these divine cows embody fundamental principles of the cosmos and reality, condensed in a timeless form, governing vast spiritual domains with unquestioned authority, maintaining the delicate threads connecting the realm of the living with the kingdom of the dead. Once again, we meet the guardians at the threshold between worlds whose names contain the power to sustain souls through eternity. The seven Hathors were thus connected to the afterlife, where they provided spiritual sustenance. The Book of the Dead describes them as providers of food offerings who ensure the deceased never goes hungry in the next world. This nurturing aspect connects beautifully to Hathor's nature as a goddess of motherhood and abundance. It is as if their collective nature both multiplies and focuses Hathor's power. As a single goddess, Hathor represented joy, music, motherhood, and sexuality. But in her sevenfold manifestation, she crystallized into beings of pure perception and declaration. Seers whose words shape destiny. The number 7 appears yet again as the perfect expression of completeness and divine order. Therefore, these 7 divine women, with their penetrating vision and decisive pronouncements, reveal yet another dimension of the mysterious power of 7 and its capacity to embody not just cosmic order but cosmic knowledge, its ability to perceive the pattern of a life from birth to death, and to read the threads of fate in all of us. The concept of the 7 Hathors endured throughout Egyptian history, from the New Kingdom through the Ptolemaic period, showing the lasting power of this sevenfold manifestation. Their role as pronouncers of fate reminds us that even in a culture that celebrated joy and sensuality, as Hathor certainly did, there remained a profound awareness of destiny's constraints, the boundaries within which human lives unfold, subject to forces beyond our control, yet not entirely beyond our influence. Similarly, the 7 sages of various traditions, whether the Greek 7 wise men, Thales of Miletus and Pittacus of Mytilene, and Bias of Priene, and our own Solon, and Cleobulus the Lindian, and Myson the Chenian. And 7th in the catalogue of wise men was the Lacedaemonian Kilo, as documented by Plato, or the Hindu Saptarishi, Sanskrit Sptarasi, meaning 7 sages, who represented wisdom incarnate. Another powerful manifestation of the mystical significance of 7 across cultures. And what makes the Saptarishi concept particularly fascinating is its evolution through time. The earliest proto-form appears in the Rig Veda, circa 1500 to 1200 BC, where 6 family lineages are associated with the family books. By the time of the Hymeneal Brahmana, the formal list emerges. Agastya, Atri, Bhardwaja, Gautama, Jamadani, Vashistha, and Vishvamitra. However, even this list wasn't fixed. The Brihadaranyaka Upanishad substitutes Kashyapa for Agastya, while later texts present further variations. Like the 7 Hathors of Egypt, these 7 enlightened beings embody divine principles and serve as cosmic guides, though with a distinct emphasis on knowledge transmission rather than fate determination. We must also not overlook 2 remarkable manifestations of this pattern: the 7 Hermetic governors and the 7 Buddhas of antiquity. These distinct traditions, one from Western esoteric philosophy and the other from Eastern spiritual wisdom, demonstrate yet again how the sevenfold divine pattern emerges independently across civilizations. The 7 governors appear in one of the most influential texts of Western esotericism, the Corpus Hermeticum. In the first book, Poimandres, Hermes Trismegistus describes a cosmogonic vision where 7 governors or administrators or rulers emerge from the divine mind to structure and govern the manifest universe. And God the mind, being male and female both, as light and life subsisting, brought forth another mind to give things form, who God as he was of fire and spirit formed 7 rulers who enclose the cosmos that the sense perceives. Men call their ruling fate. And then the book continues. Nature embraced by man brought forth a wonder, oh so wonderful. For as he had the nature of the concord of the seven, who, as I said to thee, were made of fire and spirit, nature delayed not, but immediately brought forth 7 men, in correspondence with the natures of the 7, male, female, and moving in the air. These 7 rulers or governors correspond to the 7 planetary spheres, but they represent more than astronomical bodies. They embody the fundamental creative principles through which the one divine mind structures reality. Through them, the undifferentiated unity of pure consciousness differentiates into the multiplicity of manifest existence. According to Hermetic philosophy, each governor bestows specific qualities upon humanity. The moon gives growth and decay, Mercury gives cunning and wisdom, Venus gives desire and love, the sun gives sovereignty and illumination, Mars gives boldness and impulse, Jupiter gives wealth and ambition, and Saturn gives contemplation and necessity. The Hermetic tradition teaches that spiritual ascent requires reconciling with these governors, reclaiming the divine attributes they represent, and ultimately transcending their influence to return to unity with the divine mind. This sevenfold path of return mirrors the soul's descent through the 7 spheres at birth, creating a complete cosmic cycle. The Hermetic governors reveal a sophisticated understanding of how unitary consciousness manifests through differentiated principles. A sevenfold structure that mediates between absolute unity and infinite multiplicity. They represent divine powers that are simultaneously cosmic forces, psychological principles, and aspects of human potential. Half a world away in the Buddhist tradition, we encounter another divine septet, the 7 Buddhas of antiquity, or Sapta Buddha. According to early Buddhist texts, like the Mahavadana Sutta, these are the 7 most recent historical Buddhas, culminating with Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha of our current age. These 7 awakened beings are Vipassi, the first Buddha of the good eon, Sikhi, appeared 91 eons ago, Vesabu, appeared 31 eons ago, Kakusanda, the first Buddha of our current fortunate eon, Konagamana, appeared after Kakusanda, Kassapa, the Buddha immediately preceding Gautama, and Gautama, the historical Buddha of our time. Each of these Buddhas represents the re-emergence of the same enlightenment principle in different historical epochs. Together, they form a lineage of awakened consciousness extending deep into cosmic time. The Buddha himself referred to these predecessors, acknowledging that the Dharma, or cosmic law, he discovered was not new but eternal, rediscovered in each age by those who fully awaken. In Chinese and Japanese Buddhism, these 7 Buddhas are often depicted together in temple art, representing the continuity of enlightened wisdom. Each is shown with distinct iconography, different hand gestures or mudras, sitting positions and attributes, yet all embody the same fundamental awakening. What's fascinating about these 7 Buddhas is how they integrate historical time with timeless truth. Each Buddha appears in a specific cosmic age with particular historical conditions, yet each manifests the same timeless awakening. They represent both the uniqueness of individual enlightenment experiences and the universality of awakened consciousness itself. However, while we recognize 7 specific historical Buddhas, the principle of Buddha nature transcends any numerical limitation. 7 captures completeness without implying finality. What unites these diverse traditions is not just the number 7, but the psychological function these divine septets serve. They transform abstract cosmic forces into relatable personas with whom humans can establish relationships. They embody principles that would otherwise remain too abstract to grasp. And they provide a way to understand how multiple divine energies interact within a unified cosmos, which is ultimately projected into the way you are organized or constellated within. Carl Jung recognized this psychological dimension when he authored his mysterious 7 Sermons to the Dead, attributed to Basilides of Alexandria. This work emerged from what Jung called his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of profound psychological crisis following his break with Freud. In his autobiography, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung later described how the sermons came to him. It began with a restlessness, but I did not know what it meant or what they wanted of me. There was an ominous atmosphere all around me. I had the strange feeling that the air was filled with ghostly entities. Then it was as if my house began to be haunted. My eldest daughter saw a white figure passing through the room. My second daughter, independently of her elder sister, related that twice in the night her blanket had been snatched away. And that same night, my 9-year-old son had an anxiety dream. In the morning, he asked his mother for crayons, and he, who ordinarily never drew, now made a picture of his dream. He called it the picture of the fisherman. Through the middle of the picture ran a river, and a fisherman with a rod was standing on the shore. He had caught a fish. On the fisherman's head was a chimney from which flames were leaping and smoke rising. From the other side of the river, the devil came flying through the air. He was cursing because his fish had been stolen, but above the fisherman hovered an angel who said, "You cannot do anything to him. He only catches the bad fish." My son drew this picture on a Saturday. Suspicious as hell. Picture that for a moment. One of the greatest psychological minds of the 20th century, sitting in his home in Kusnacht, suddenly surrounded by spirits demanding wisdom. And what form does this wisdom take? 7 discourses, not 6, not 8. But exactly 7 sermons were delivered as if from beyond the grave. When the unconscious itself organizes information, it apparently prefers packages of 7. If that doesn't make you wonder about the fundamental structure of consciousness, I don't know what would. The spirits of the dead came to him seeking what they could not find in Jerusalem, wisdom beyond faith. And Jung, speaking as Basilides, delivered 7 discourses on the nature of reality, the pleroma, differentiation, God and devil, creation, sexuality, and the human journey. This is a text where Jung elaborates on the sevenfold structure of consciousness, channeled through an ancient Gnostic voice that emerged in unusual circumstances, almost as a prophecy. Jung understood that these divine septets are expressions of fundamental psychic structures. In Psychology and Religion, he writes, "The archetypes are, so to speak, organs of the pre-rational psyche. They are eternally inherited forms and ideas which have at first no specific content. Their specific content only appears in the course of the individual's life, when personal experience is taken up in precisely these forms. This way we reach a middle way between belief and skepticism. The septets don't need to be accepted as literal cosmic beings, but they can be recognized as meaningful structures in our consciousness." In his critique of practical reason, Immanuel Kant wrote, "Two things fill the mind with ever new and increasing admiration and awe. The more often and steadily we reflect upon them, the starry heavens above me and the moral law within me. I do not seek or conjecture either of them as if they were veiled obscurities or extravagances beyond the horizon of my vision. I see them before me and connect them immediately with the consciousness of my existence. As above, so below. The starry sky above is reflected in the world within. When we look up at the night sky and see the wandering planets, we might remember how our ancestors saw divine intelligences and cosmic forces that shaped the heavens and the human soul. And in that remembrance, we might recognize that the boundary between astronomy and astrology and psychology and philosophy and other arts and sciences, or between outer space and inner space, is more permeable than our minds, drained by modernity, typically allow. I've spent countless nights staring at the stars with both the telescope and the naked eye. And I can tell you there is something profoundly different about experiencing celestial movements directly rather than through screens or paper. There are moments, rare but unmistakable, when the wisdom of the ancients suddenly makes sense, at least intuitively. When you can almost feel how the spheres Pythagoras would call harmonious might indeed be conscious entities, whose movements encode messages for those with eyes to see and minds to comprehend. Maybe those moments might be just psychological projections, perhaps, but they connect us to the longest continuous thread of human experience. The conversation between consciousness and cosmos has sustained our species since we first looked upward in wonder, because it is in the links, the patterns, the fractals, the connections, the ties, the bridges, the chains, the overlaps that you find the meaning of the universe, which, as above, so below, is also highly important for your meaning and conduct in life. When our ancestors gazed at the 7 planets traversing the night sky, they intuited a sevenfold structure to the cosmos. But their genius didn't stop there. They recognized that this pattern might extend into the human body. That we, as microcosms of the universe, might contain our own 7 celestial centers. In the yogic and tantric traditions of India, this intuition found its most developed expression in the system of 7 chakras, a Sanskrit word meaning wheels or discs of energy. These 7 energy centers, aligned along the spine from its base to the crown of the head, create an inner cosmos that mirrors the outer one, a sevenfold map of consciousness embedded in our very flesh. But here's the fascinating twist that most New Age books won't tell you. The rainbow-colored chakra system, so familiar to Western yoga practitioners, is largely a modern creation. A beautiful and perhaps useful fiction that bears only passing resemblance to the original tantric systems. Isn't it remarkable how we've convinced ourselves we're practicing ancient wisdom when much of what we're doing was invented during the 20th century? The historical reality is far more complex and honestly more interesting. While concepts of subtle energy and channels, nadis, date back to early texts, the fully developed system of 7 chakras emerged gradually through medieval tantric traditions. The most influential text, the Satkakra Nirupana, composed by Punananda Swami in 1577, does describe a system of 6 chakras plus the Sahasrara at the crown, but its descriptions differ significantly from modern Western interpretations. For one thing, the vibrant rainbow colors we now associate with each chakra, the red root chakra ascending to the violet crown, are entirely absent from traditional texts. This color scheme was introduced by Charles W. Leadbeater in his 1927 book, The Chakras, influenced by Western color theory and Newton's spectrum. The original tantric visualizations involved much more complex symbolism. Specific deities, animals, Sanskrit letters, geometric patterns, and subtle elements associated with each center. But don't let this historical reality diminish your appreciation for the sevenfold system. In fact, I find it more fascinating that humans across different cultures and times have independently gravitated toward organizing subtle energies and consciousness into groups of 7. Perhaps there is something about 7 that is closer to our cognitive architecture, our nervous system, or some deeper pattern in reality itself. According to traditional tantric texts, the 7 major chakras are Muladhara, Muladhara, the root chakra at the base of the spine, associated with the element of earth. In the Satkakra Nirupana, it's described as a 4-petaled lotus containing a yellow square, earth element, and the seed syllable lam, with the elephant-headed deity Ganesha presiding. Svadhisthana, Svadhisthana, the sacral chakra in the genital region associated with the water element, represented by a 6-petaled lotus containing a crescent moon and the seed syllable vam. Manipura, Manipur, the navel chakra, associated with the fire element, visualized as a 10-petaled lotus containing a downward-pointing triangle and the seed syllable ram. Anahata, Anaiti, the heart chakra, associated with the air element, depicted as a 12-petaled lotus containing 2 intersecting triangles, forming a hexagram, and the seed syllable yam. Vishuddha, Vishuddha, the throat chakra, associated with the space ether element, visualized as a 16-petaled lotus containing a circle and the seed syllable ham. Ajna, Ajna, the command chakra at the forehead, represented by a 2-petaled lotus containing the seed syllable om. Sahasrara, Shrar, the 1,000-petaled crown chakra at the top of the head, which technically isn't a chakra in the original system, but the destination of the awakened Kundalini energy as it rises through the chakras. The original purpose of these chakras was liberation. Tantric practitioners visualize these centers as part of sophisticated meditation practices aimed at awakening the dormant Kundalini energy coiled at the base of the spine. When awakened through proper techniques, this divine feminine energy would rise through the central channel, Sushumna, piercing each chakra in turn until it united with the masculine consciousness, Shiva, at the crown, a union representing enlightenment. Have you noticed how this ascent through 7 levels mirrors so many other sevenfold systems we've explored? From Ptolemy's 7 planetary ages to Dante's 7 terraces of purgatory to the ancient cosmological journey through planetary spheres. All describe a progressive refinement from gross materiality to pure spirit. 7 steps seem to capture the full spectrum of transformation across diverse traditions. But be aware and always remember, chakras aren't about balancing your emotions or picking pretty colors. This is about awakening to your true nature, and it's not always comfortable. After hours of intense pranayama and mantra repetition, something shifts. It is not the rainbow light show the beginner imagines, but a profound sense of energy moving through your body in waves, accompanied by spontaneous mudras, or hand gestures, you hadn't consciously initiated. Certainly not the gentle, pleasant experience promised by popular chakra books. The Western adoption and transformation of the chakra system is a fascinating study in cultural appropriation and creative reinterpretation. It began with the Theosophical Society in the late 19th century, particularly H.P. Blavatsky, who introduced Eastern esoteric concepts to Western audiences. Sir John Woodrofe's 1919 translation of the Sat Chakra Nirupana, published under the pen name Arthur Avalon as The Serpent Power, brought the chakra system to wider Western awareness. But it was really in the 1960s and 1970s, with the countercultural embrace of Eastern spirituality, that chakras entered mainstream Western consciousness. The New Age movement of the 1980s further popularized the system, adding layers of psychological interpretation, healing applications, and correspondences with everything from gemstones to essential oils to sound frequencies, most of which were absent from the original traditions. By the 1990s, as Kurt Leland notes in his research for the Theosophical Society, the modern Western chakra system had fully crystallized into what he calls an unintentional collaboration between esotericists, Indologists, psychologists in the Jungian tradition, and energy healers. The rainbow colors and list of psychological qualities associated with each chakra first appeared together only in 1977, making them younger than Star Wars. Carl Jung studied the chakra system and discussed it in his psychological work. In his 1932 Kundalini Yoga seminar in Zurich, Jung approached the chakras as psychological symbols rather than literal energy centers. According to Jung scholars, he saw parallels between the chakra system and his own model of psychological development toward individuation. As documented in the Psychology of Kundalini Yoga notes of the seminar. Given in 1932, Jung stated, "The chakras are also occasionally called mandalas. In Jungian psychology, mandalas are archetypal images representing wholeness, balance, and the integrated psyche. By likening chakras to mandalas, Jung suggests that chakras are not simply physical or energetic centers within the body, as described in Eastern traditions, but also psychological constructs that map the structure of the psyche. Like mandalas, chakras serve for contemplation and self-realization, a visual and symbolic framework to navigate consciousness. This connection underscores Jung's view that both chakras and mandalas are universal expressions of the psyche's attempt to organize and harmonize its inner chaos, bridging Eastern mysticism with Western psychological analysis." Then in the same notes he elaborates, "The chakras are symbols. They symbolize highly complex psychic facts which, at the present moment, we could not possibly express except in images. The chakras are therefore of great value to us because they represent a real effort to give a symbolic theory of the psyche. The psyche is something so highly complicated, so vast in extent, and so rich in elements unknown to us, and its aspects overlap and interweave with one another in such an amazing degree that we always turn to symbols in order to try to represent what we know about it. Any theory about it would be premature because it would become entangled in particularities and would lose sight of the totality we set out to envisage. Here Jung articulates the symbolic significance of the chakras as representations of variegated psychological realities that defy straightforward verbal or rational explanation. The psyche, in Jung's view, is a vast and dynamic system, encompassing conscious and unconscious elements that interact in ways too complex for linear analysis. Chakras, as symbols, provide a visual and metaphorical language to approach this complexity, capturing aspects of the psyche that cannot yet be fully articulated through scientific or discursive means. By describing the chakras as part of a symbolic theory of the psyche, Jung highlights their role as a structured yet flexible map of our consciousness. He cautions against overly rigid or reductionist theories which risk losing sight of the psyche's holistic nature. Instead, symbols like the chakras allow for an intuitive and integrative approach, preserving the mystery and interconnectedness of psychic phenomena while offering a pathway to explore them. This perspective reflects Jung's broader emphasis on the importance of symbols in bridging the known and unknown aspects of the self. Jung further elaborates, "It is as if we viewed our psychology and the psychology of mankind from the standpoint of a fourth dimension, unlimited by space or time. The chakra system is created from this standpoint. It is a standpoint that transcends time and the individual." Jung elevates the chakra system to a metaphysical and archetypal level, suggesting it transcends ordinary human experience. By invoking the idea of a fourth dimension, Jung implies a mode of perception that goes beyond the constraints of three-dimensional space and linear time, akin to a timeless, universal consciousness. The chakra system, in his view, is not just a product of individual or cultural imagination, but a symbolic representation of the collective psyche, reflecting universal patterns of human development and awareness. Thus, it ties to the collective unconscious, where archetypes and symbols emerge as shared structures of human experience. A map of psychological evolution that is both personal and universal, connecting the individual to our broader spiritual and psychic heritage. This perspective underscores Jung's fascination with Eastern philosophies and their ability to articulate timeless truths about the human condition. Last but not least, Jung writes, "The chakras are symbols for human levels of consciousness in general. Ethnically and psychologically, we can distinguish three different psychical localizations, of which the first corresponds more or less to Muladhara Svadhisthana, the second to Manipura and Anahata, and the third to Visuddha and Ajna. The psychology of the lower centers is analogous to the one of primitives, unconscious, instinctive, and involved in participation mystique. Life appears here as an occurrence, so to speak, without ego. One is not aware that one wants or does things. Everything happens as it were in the third person." Jung maps the chakra system onto a hierarchical model of consciousness, dividing it into three broad psychological stages, each associated with specific chakras. The lower chakras, Muladhara and Svadhisthana, represent the most primal, instinct-driven levels of the psyche, akin to what Jung describes as the primitive mindset. At this stage, individuals operate largely unconsciously, driven by biological impulses and collective instincts, with little self-awareness or individuality. Jung's use of participation mystique refers to a state of psychological fusion with the environment, where the ego is not yet differentiated, and experiences are perceived as external events rather than products of personal agency. The middle chakras, Manipura and Anahata, likely correspond to the emergence of ego consciousness and emotional awareness, while the higher chakras, Visuddha and Ajna, represent advanced stages of self-realization, clarity and spiritual insight. By framing the chakras as symbols of these developmental stages, Jung integrates Eastern esoteric traditions with his psychological theories, particularly his ideas about individuation, or the process of becoming a fully integrated, conscious individual. This passage also reflects Jung's comparative approach, drawing parallels between the chakra system and the psychological evolution of humanity, from instinctual beginnings to higher states of awareness. Building on these foundations, contemporary practitioners like Anadia Judith have developed systems that correlate each chakra with psychological functions and developmental stages. In her influential work Eastern Body, Western Mind, 1996, Judith maps the chakras to Western psychological theories of development, trauma, and healing. This approach doesn't require belief in subtle energies. It uses the chakra system as an organizational framework for understanding psychological growth. The sevenfold chakra system, whether in its traditional tantric form or modern Western adaptation, illustrates our persistent human drive to map consciousness. We seem compelled to create models that bridge body and mind, matter and spirit, the cosmic and the personal. And 7 repeatedly emerges as the ideal number of divisions for this mapping. Could this be related to the cognitive limit identified by psychologist George Miller in his famous 1956 paper, The Magical Number 7 ± 2? As you already know, Miller found that human working memory typically handles about 7 chunks of information, suggesting our cognitive architecture might naturally gravitate towards sevenfold categorizations. Or perhaps 7 represents something more fundamental about how consciousness is structured. Consider that even modern neuroscience, with its sophisticated brain imaging technologies, still struggles to create comprehensive maps of consciousness. We have detailed atlases of brain regions and neural networks, but remain far from understanding how these physical structures give rise to subjective experience. In this light, the chakra system represents a remarkable early attempt to map not just the brain, but consciousness, using the technology of attention, visualization and subtle awareness rather than MRIs or EEGs. Whether or not chakras exist in some objective sense seems less important than whether working with them produces meaningful insights and transformations. And for millions of practitioners worldwide, they clearly do. The recurring pattern of 7 emerges yet again, not as a random number, but as a natural division of the spectrum of human experience. From the most material to the most ethereal aspects of our nature, 7 steps seem to capture the full range of consciousness in a way that feels instinctively complete. As above, so below. The 7 planets of ancient cosmology find their reflection in the 7 energy centers of our being. The macrocosm of the universe and the microcosm of the human body reveal the same fundamental pattern, a sevenfold structure that appears across diverse traditions and epochs. Whether this represents an inherent architecture of reality or simply the way human consciousness naturally organizes experience remains an open question, and perhaps one of the most incredible mysteries of all. Having explored how the pattern of 7 manifests in the cosmos and within the human body, let us now turn to how it structures our morality. For just as the universe arranges itself in 7s and our bodies contain 7 energy centers, so too does our ethical life naturally organize itself into 7 virtues to cultivate and 7 vices to avoid, so they say. The 7 virtues and 7 deadly sins represent one of the most influential ethical models in Western civilization, shaping art, literature, theology, and personal moral guidance for centuries. They offer us not merely a list of do's and don'ts, but a comprehensive map of human moral psychology, a sevenfold path toward either spiritual elevation or degradation. The concept of 7 deadly sins, or capital vices, has a fascinating evolution. While we often associate them with medieval Christianity, their origins trace back to the 4th century desert father Evagrius Ponticus, who identified 8 evil thoughts, logismoi, that plagued monks in their spiritual practice. His list included gluttony, lust, avarice, sadness, anger, acedia, spiritual sloth, vainglory, and pride. This 8-fold schema was revised by Pope Gregory III in the 6th century, who combined vainglory with pride, added envy, and renamed sadness as sloth, creating the canonical 7 we know today: pride, superbia; greed, avaritia; lust, luxuria; envy, invidia; gluttony, gula; wrath, ira; and sloth, acedia. Isn't it intriguing how the list was deliberately modified from 8 to 7 sins? It suggests that the sevenfold pattern was so compelling that even established theological categories were adjusted to fit it. 7 had become the natural number for expressing a complete system. The 7 virtues evolved similarly. They combined the 4 cardinal virtues of classical philosophy, prudence, justice, temperance, and courage, articulated by Plato and Aristotle, with the 3 theological virtues from St. Paul's first letter to the Corinthians, 13:13, faith, hope, and charity or love. Together, they formed a sevenfold counterbalance to the 7 deadly sins. These opposing 7s created a moral framework of remarkable psychological depth. Each sin represented a prohibited action, but more importantly, a fundamental distortion of human desire, a way that our natural longings become twisted into self-destructive patterns. Similarly, each virtue represented a state of character to develop a way of being in the world that led to flourishing. The 7 vices and virtues became powerful cultural symbols embedded in art, architecture, and literature. Dante's Divine Comedy perhaps most famously incorporated them into its structure, with the 7 terraces of Mount Purgatory, each dedicated to the purification of one of the 7 deadly sins. As souls ascend the mountain, they are cleansed of pride, then envy, then wrath, and so on, in a spiritual journey that literally embodies moral development. It's amazing how Dante's Mount Purgatory serves as a vertical map of the soul's moral evolution, a spiritual equivalent to the ascending chakras along the spine or the planetary spheres in the heavens. Once again, we find a sevenfold ascent representing the path to perfection. The Renaissance painter Hieronymus Bosch depicted the 7 deadly sins as a table-like surface with different segments showing scenes of each vice. At the center of the table is the eye of God, with Christ emerging from the pupil, a reminder that divine consciousness witnesses all our moral choices. The Latin inscription around this eye reads, "Cave, cave, Deus videt." Beware, beware, God sees. Imagine living with such an imagery in medieval times, this constant reminder that every moral failure is witnessed by an all-seeing divine eye. How different from our fragmented moral landscape, where ethical choices often feel like personal preferences without cosmic significance. What makes the 7 deadly sins particularly psychologically sophisticated is that they represent interconnected patterns of dysfunction. Pride sits at the root of all other sins, the exaltation of self that distorts all other desires. From this fundamental self-centeredness flow the other 6 vices, each corrupting a natural human desire. Greed distorts our need for resources, lust our need for connection, envy our desire for fulfillment, gluttony our need for sustenance, wrath our response to injustice, and sloth our need for rest. The 7 virtues function similarly as interconnected states of character rather than isolated good deeds. Prudence, practical wisdom, guides all other virtues. Justice governs our relations with others. Temperance moderates our appetites. Courage strengthens our resolve. Faith orients us toward ultimate reality. Hope maintains our motivation. And charity, the greatest of these, transforms how we relate to both God and neighbor. Remember the cartoonish devils tempting children into various misdeeds we saw in movies or other works of art? What strikes me is how inadequate this portrayal feels when generalized or radicalized. The sins are our internal tendencies, thus parts of ourselves we can recognize even at a young age. Who hasn't felt the stirrings of envy or pride? Who hasn't known moments of excessive indulgence or lazy avoidance? These sevenfold patterns again. Modern psychology has found remarkable value in this ancient sevenfold schema. The 7 deadly sins roughly correspond to dysfunctional patterns identified in contemporary theories of personality disorders and cognitive distortions. Pride resembles narcissistic tendencies. Envy connects to comparison-based unhappiness, studied by social psychologists. Wrath parallels issues of anger management and impulse control. The medieval framework, stripped of its explicitly religious language, continues to ameliorate certain human dysfunctions. Similarly, the 7 virtues align with positive psychology's emphasis on character strengths and psychological flourishing. The persistence of these septets suggests they truly capture something fundamental about human ethical psychology. 7 categories seem to be neither too few to capture the complexity of moral life nor too many to be practically useful. They provide a manageable taxonomy of virtues to cultivate and vices to avoid, and thus a complete system for moral development. But why 7? Why not 5 or 10? Perhaps because 7 represents the natural limit of our working memory, as psychologist George Miller famously identified. Or perhaps because 7 allows for sufficient differentiation while maintaining coherence, as we've seen repeatedly in systems from planets to chakras to rainbow colors. The relationship between the 7 deadly sins and the 7 planetary powers offers another layer of connection. Medieval thinkers associated each sin with a planetary influence. One can imagine how pride can be associated with the sun, greed with Mercury perhaps, certainly lust with Venus. Mars is wrath, or maybe Saturn with wrath. there are several ways these associations can overlap. Thus, human moral tendencies are influenced by cosmic forces. Whether understood literally as planetary influences or metaphorically as universal principles. These associations appear in Peter Binsfeld's 1589 classification of demons, where each of the 7 princes of hell corresponds to one of the deadly sins: Lucifer, pride; Mammon, greed; Asmodeus, lust; Leviathan, envy; Beelzebub, gluttony; Satan, wrath; and Belphegor, sloth. The sevenfold pattern extends from the highest heavens to the lowest hells, structuring infernal realms alongside the celestial. What all these sevenfold moral systems share is recognition that human ethical development follows patterns that mirror cosmic order. Our moral journey isn't arbitrary, but aligns with the fundamental structure of reality. The same sevenfold pattern that organizes planets, chakras, and colors also organizes our path toward either virtue or vice. The macrocosm of the universe and the microcosm of human morality reflect each other. In our fragmented modern world, we've largely lost this integrated vision. We separate science from morality and both from spirituality. But these sevenfold systems remind us that these domains were once unified. That understanding the cosmos, cultivating virtue, and developing consciousness were seen as interconnected aspects of a single journey. Perhaps this is what we most need to recover. Not necessarily the specific medieval formulations, but the integrated vision they represent. A recognition that our moral lives aren't separate from cosmic patterns or psychological development, but part of an integrated whole. 7 virtues to cultivate, 7 vices to avoid, 7 chakras to awaken, 7 planets to understand, all part of the same great journey of becoming. As Dante ascended the 7 terraces of Mount Purgatory, each level purged one deadly sin and cultivated its opposing virtue. With each step, the mountain grew lighter, the climb easier, until reaching the earthly paradise at the summit. This sevenfold journey of moral transformation mirrors the Hindu yogic ascent through 7 chakras, culminating in the crown of pure consciousness. Different traditions, same sevenfold path. A universal pattern of human growth and transformation is captured in the perfect number 7. And so the knowledge deepens. If 7 provides the framework for cosmic order, bodily energy, and moral development, it should come as no surprise that it also structures human knowledge. The 7 liberal arts represent one of history's most enduring educational curricula, designed to cultivate the complete human being through 7 essential fields of study. The concept of the liberal arts emerged in classical antiquity, but their organization into a sevenfold system crystallized during the early Middle Ages. The term liberal derives from the Latin liberalis, meaning worthy of a free person. These were the disciplines considered essential for citizens who participated in public life, as opposed to servile arts pursued for purely practical or economic purposes. Martianus Capella's influential 5th century work, The Marriage of Philology and Mercury, presented the 7 arts as bridesmaids at this celestial wedding, forever cementing their number at 7 and personifying them as feminine embodiments of knowledge. The subjects were divided into 2 groups: the trivium, the threefold way, and the quadrivium, the fourfold way. The trivium consisted of grammar, which is the study of language structure and literary interpretation; logic, or the study of reasoning and argumentation; rhetoric, the study of persuasive communication and eloquence. The quadrivium contained arithmetic, the study of numbers and their properties; geometry, the study of spatial relationships and forms; music, the study of harmonics, ratios and proportions; astronomy, the study of celestial movements and their patterns. Notice how these 7 disciplines progress from the basic tools of thought, language, logic, persuasion, to the mathematical understanding of reality in increasingly complex forms: discrete numbers, spatial forms, harmonics and celestial movements. They represent a systematic ascent from the concrete to the abstract, from expression to contemplation. Boethius, writing in the early 6th century, further refined the concept of the quadrivium in his influential mathematical treatises. In his work De Institutione Arithmetica, he declares, "This, therefore, is the quadrivium by which we bring a superior mind from knowledge offered by the senses to the more certain things of the intellect." For medieval scholars, these 7 arts were pathways to wisdom. They were seen as progressive steps toward understanding both the created world and its divine creator. Each art revealed different aspects of the cosmic order, and together they formed a complete educational system. I've often wondered how different my education might have been if organized around these 7 arts instead of our modern compartmentalized subjects. Imagine learning music not as a separate elective, but as a mathematical discipline, revealing the same proportional harmonies found in geometry and astronomy. Or studying rhetoric not as abstract communication skills, but as the culmination of grammatical and logical foundations. The 7 liberal arts structured the actual curriculum in cathedral schools and early universities throughout Europe. Students first mastered the trivium before advancing to the higher disciplines of the quadrivium. This progressive education reflected the medieval understanding that knowledge, like all aspects of reality, was hierarchically structured and interconnected. The 7 liberal arts appeared prominently in medieval art and architecture. At Chartres Cathedral, they're personified as female figures on the right portal of the west facade, each paired with a historical master of that discipline. Grammar with Donatus, logic with Aristotle, rhetoric with Cicero, and so on. Similar representations appear in manuscripts, tapestries, and stained glass throughout Europe. These 7 disciplines were understood to reveal the divine mind itself. For medieval thinkers, studying these arts meant participating in the rational order that God had established in creation. As Hugh of St. Victor proclaimed, "The man who finds his homeland sweet is still a tender beginner. He to whom every soil is as his native one is already strong, but he is perfect to whom the entire world is as a foreign place." This passage suggests that the true purpose of the liberal arts was to transcend provincial thinking, to see beyond one's limited perspective to universal principles. The sevenfold curriculum was designed to transform consciousness. The connection between the 7 liberal arts and the other sevenfold systems we've explored isn't coincidental. Dante, in his Convivio, associates the 7 liberal arts with the 7 planets: grammar with the moon, logic with Mercury, rhetoric with Venus, arithmetic with the sun, music with Mars, geometry with Jupiter, and astronomy with Saturn. Isn't it remarkable how these correspondences create a unified vision of reality? The same sevenfold pattern that structures the cosmos also structures education. The ascent through the 7 arts mirrors the soul's ascent through the planetary spheres, with each stage revealing new dimensions of reality. The 7 liberal arts continued to influence Western education even after the Middle Ages. Renaissance humanists revived and expanded this curriculum, bringing new emphasis to classical texts and linguistic studies. The ideal of a well-rounded education based on these 7 disciplines persisted in various forms through the 18th and 19th centuries, forming the foundation of what we now call liberal arts education. Even today, though we've added countless fields of specialized study, the essential structure of the 7 liberal arts remains influential. Contemporary liberal arts colleges still emphasize fundamental skills of language and reasoning, alongside mathematical and scientific understanding, a modern remembrance of the ancient trivium and quadrivium. What we've lost, perhaps, is the sense of these disciplines as an integrated whole, a sevenfold path toward wisdom, rather than separate subjects to be mastered in isolation. The modern fragmentation of knowledge into hyper-specialized fields has gained depth at the cost of unity. We know more about individual trees, but have lost sight of the forest, and for me, it's saddening. But let's not despair. The persistence of the 7 liberal arts across millennia suggests they capture something essential about how human knowledge naturally organizes itself. 7 disciplines seem to provide the right balance between specialization and integration, enough distinct fields to cover the range of human understanding, but few enough to form a coherent system. Makes sense, doesn't it? I sometimes wonder if we might still benefit from viewing education through this sevenfold lens. I'm not saying we should return to a medieval curriculum, but think about it. Don't you want to recover the sense that true learning is a transformation of consciousness? That education, like all sevenfold systems, represents a journey from the most basic foundations to the highest integration. In the medieval vision, mastery of the seven liberal arts prepared one for the study of philosophy, which in turn prepared one for theology or the contemplation of divine reality. Knowledge ascended from practical skills to abstract principles to mystical insight, mirroring the soul's journey through the seven planetary spheres or the awakening of the seven chakras. This integration of knowledge with spiritual development may seem foreign to our secular age, but it offered a coherence that our fragmented modern education often lacks. The seven liberal arts were stages in a transformative journey, a sevenfold path toward wisdom that mirrored the cosmic order itself, as above, so below. The pattern of seven that structures the cosmos, the human body, and moral development also structures human knowledge. The macrocosm of the universe and the microcosm of education reflect the same divine pattern. A sevenfold map of reality that leads from basic skills to universal principles to ultimate wisdom. From the music of the spheres to the structure of knowledge, we've seen seven emerge repeatedly as the perfect number to express completeness. But perhaps nowhere is this sevenfold pattern more immediately accessible to our senses than in the seven colors of the rainbow and the seven notes of the diatonic scale. Here, the abstract pattern becomes visible to our eyes and audible to our ears as a direct sensory experience of cosmic order. The sevenfold division of the color spectrum has a fascinating history. While the continuous band of light refracting through water droplets could theoretically be divided in countless ways, Isaac Newton deliberately chose to identify seven distinct colors, explicitly drawing a parallel with the seven notes of the musical scale. In his letter to the Royal Society, Newton wrote, "The original or primary colors are red, yellow, green, blue, and a violet purple, together with orange, indigo, and an indefinite variety of intermediate shades." But why exactly seven? Newton himself acknowledged the continuous nature of the spectrum, yet he imposed a sevenfold structure upon it. Some say he was influenced by the Pythagorean tradition that saw seven as a number of mystical significance. Others point to the practical analogy with the seven-note musical scale, which Newton explicitly referenced. What's remarkable is that Newton, the father of modern physics, chose to organize his groundbreaking optical discoveries according to an ancient pattern, and maintain the sevenfold structure that had organized human knowledge for millennia, even as he revolutionized our understanding of light. The seven notes of the Western musical scale have an even older history. The diatonic scale emerged gradually over centuries, but its mathematical basis was first articulated by Pythagoras in the 6th century BC. By experimenting with a monochord, a single-stringed instrument, he discovered that strings whose lengths form simple ratios produce harmonious sounds when played together. The most pleasing intervals corresponded to the simplest ratios: the octave, or a ratio of 2 to 1, the perfect fifth, a ratio of 3 to 2, and the perfect fourth, a ratio of 4 to 3. From these basic intervals, Pythagoras and his followers derived a seven-note scale that seemed to capture the mathematical harmony underlying musical sound. The interesting part is how these seven notes don't just sound pleasing, but feel complete. Play a scale from Tao to Ti, and it feels unfinished. The ear longs for the return to Tao in the octave above. These seven steps create a journey that demands resolution, a microcosm of departure and return that mirrors so many other sevenfold patterns we've explored. The ancient Greeks recognized profound connections between these seven musical tones and the seven planets as well. In the Pythagorean conception, each planet produced a particular tone as it moved through the heavens, creating what was called the music of the spheres or harmony of the cosmos, which I already told you about. The 1st century Roman author Pliny the Elder wrote in his Natural History, "Pythagoras, employing the terms that are used in music, sometimes names the distance between the earth and the moon a tone. From her to Mercury, he supposes to be half this space, and about the same from him to Venus. From her to the sun is a tone and a half. From the sun to Mars is a tone, the same as from the earth to the moon. From him there is half a tone to Jupiter. from Jupiter to Saturn also half a tone, and thence a tone and a half to the zodiac. Hence, there are 7 tones which he terms the diapason harmony, meaning the whole compass of the notes. In this, Saturn is said to move in the Doric time, Jupiter in the Phrygian, and so forth of the rest. But this is a refinement rather amusing than useful. While Pliny might have dismissed the specifics as entertainment, the underlying concept is profound. The same mathematical proportions that create harmony in music also govern the movements of celestial bodies. The sevenfold musical scale and the 7 planets both express the same fundamental cosmic order. This connection between music and the cosmos wasn't unique to Western tradition. In ancient China, the 7-note scale was associated with cosmic principles, though the specific system of pentatonic and heptatonic scales differed from Western music. In India, the 7 basic notes, saptaka, were linked to emotional states, times of day, and cosmic energies. It also seems these sevenfold divisions of sound emerged independently across cultures. While the specific intervals and tuning systems varied, the pattern of 7 notes appears consistently, suggesting we might naturally and inherently organize the continuous spectrum of sound in septets as well. Synesthesia is also noteworthy. Some people literally see colors when hearing specific tones, which is a neurological confirmation that there is a deep connection between multiple sensory domains. The relationship between the 7 colors and 7 notes exemplifies what the Hermetic tradition called correspondence, the principle that patterns repeat across different levels of reality, like a fractal. The same mathematical proportions that create harmony in sound also create harmony in light. The sevenfold division that organizes one sensory domain organizes another. Modern science offers its own perspective on these sevenfold patterns. The visible light spectrum is just a small portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, ranging from approximately 400 to 700 nanometers in wavelength. Similarly, the audible sound spectrum for humans ranges from about 20 to 20,000 hertz. In both cases, our sensory apparatus evolved to detect the portions of these spectra most relevant to our survival and functioning in the world. One cannot think what's beyond this range and how we may be able to perceive it directly. Can we evolve? Will we evolve? We shall see. But the sevenfold division of these continuous spectra might reflect how our perceptual systems naturally categorize sensory information, breaking continuous variation into manageable, distinct categories, like the way our perception tends to chunk information into groups of 7 plus or minus 2, as psychologist George Miller observed. This cognitive limitation might explain why 7 emerges so consistently as the number of distinct categories in various domains, because it seems to be the optimal number of divisions for human perception and memory. Not so few that important distinctions are lost, not so many that the system becomes unwieldy, but the 7 colors and 7 notes have influenced us beyond their sensory qualities. Color symbolism based on the 7-hued rainbow appears in religious and spiritual traditions worldwide. The 7 chakras we explored earlier are each associated with a specific color, creating a rainbow ladder from the base of the spine to the crown of the head. Similarly, the 7 musical notes have acquired rich symbolic associations. In medieval music theory, each mode, a particular arrangement of the 7 notes, was associated with specific emotional qualities and even moral characteristics. The Dorian mode was considered solemn and devout, the Lydian joyful and pastoral, and so on. These associations reflected the genuine emotional responses these tonal patterns evoke, responses that seem remarkably consistent across cultures and individuals. Thus, the 7-note scale doesn't just organize sound mathematically, but maps the full range of human emotional experience through tonal relationships. Think about the music you listen to, and the colors you see in the art and the people that surround you. Have you ever stopped to wonder how these influence you? How they complement or compete with other variables that contribute to who you are and who you will become if you let things be? I've often wondered whether other intelligent species or forms of life would organize light and sound into septets. Would beings with different sensory apparatus and cognitive models and structures arrive at the same divisions? Or is the pattern of 7 somehow unique to human perception? Is it a reflection of how our particular consciousness interfaces with reality? Perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between, having a metaphorical foot in all of them. It seems that the mathematical relationships that underlie both the color spectrum and musical harmony exist independently of human perception. The wavelengths of light and frequency ratios of sound would remain the same, even if no one were there to perceive them. Unless you start thinking quantum, and suddenly the observer and the observed stop being separated the way we are used to. Yet the particular sevenfold organization we impose on these continuous phenomena might reflect our specifically human way of interfacing with these mathematical realities. What's undeniable is that these sevens are everywhere. It is an elaborate fractal in the making, and we are honored to be able to look at the world the way Pythagoras and Plato did millennia ago. From Newton's 7 colors to the 7 notes that structure all Western music, these sensory sevens provide direct experiential access to the same cosmic order that manifests in planets, chakras, virtues, and knowledge systems. When we see a rainbow arching across the sky after rain, we're witnessing a visible manifestation of the sevenfold pattern that structures reality at every level, from cosmic to psychological to sensory. And when we hear a musical scale ascending through 7 distinct tones before returning to its origin an octave higher, we're experiencing an audible version of the same universal pattern. As above, so below. As in the heavens, so in our very senses. The macrocosm of cosmic order and the microcosm of human perception reflect the same generative oneness that knows how to speak in septets that may be neither arbitrary nor culturally imposed, but a reflection of the inherent architecture of reality, or at least of how human consciousness naturally organizes its experience of reality. Perhaps in the 7 colors of the rainbow and the 7 notes of the musical scale, we directly perceive the whole universe, made manifest to our senses. The abstract pattern becomes concrete experience, and the universal becomes personal. It seems that 7, the number of completeness, structures not just the cosmos, but the very way we see and hear the world. Now imagine ascending beyond the planetary spheres, beyond even the stars themselves, straight into the realms of pure divine presence. For millennia, entire religious traditions across the world saw the cosmos as a series of ascending planes. And once again, number 7 appears with its mysterious persistence. The concept of 7 heavens appears with remarkable consistency across disparate religious traditions, including in Islamic cosmology, the Quran speaks of 7 heavens, Sab'a Samawatin, Sab'a Samawat, created in perfect harmony. Surah At-Talaq, the divorce, verse 12, from the Quran reveals that Allah is He who created 7 heavens, and of the earth the like of them, 7 earths. The command descends among them, that you may know that Allah has power over all things, and that Allah indeed encompasses all things in His knowledge. The Prophet Muhammad's night journey, the Miraj, stands as one of the most profound mystical experiences in religious history. This celestial ascension through 7 heavens appears in authenticated hadith collections, providing another striking example of the sevenfold pattern we've been exploring. The primary sources for this journey are found in Sahih al-Bukhari and Sahih Muslim, considered the most authoritative hadith collections in Islam. The narrative begins with Muhammad being taken from Mecca to Jerusalem, the Isra, followed by his ascension through the heavens, the Miraj. In Sahih al-Bukhari, Volume 5, Book 58, number 227, narrated by Malik bin Sa'sa'a, Muhammad describes how the angel Gabriel accompanied him through each heaven, requesting permission to enter with words that established a pattern. Gabriel asked for the gate to be opened. It was asked, "Who is it?" He replied, "Gabriel." It was asked, "Who is accompanying you?" He replied, "Muhammad." What emerges is a carefully structured journey through 7 distinct celestial realms, each housing a different prophet. In the first heaven, Muhammad encountered Adam, the father of humanity. Adam was shown the souls of his descendants to his right and left, smiling when looking at the righteous and weeping when viewing the damned. This positioning of Adam is deeply symbolic, As the first human, he appropriately occupies the first celestial realm. In the second heaven, Jesus or Isa and John the Baptist or Yahya, cousins whose births were miraculous interventions in the natural order. Their placement together is significant for their roles as reformers within their religious tradition. In the third heaven is Joseph, or Yusuf, renowned in both biblical and Quranic accounts for his exceptional beauty and moral integrity through severe trials. The Quran describes him as Ahsan al-Qasas, the most beautiful of stories, making his placement in the progressive ascension particularly meaningful. In the fourth heaven appears Enoch, or Idris, whom the Quran mentions briefly but significantly, and mention in the book Idris. Indeed, he was a man of truth and a prophet, and we raised him to a high station, in Surah 19, verses 56 to 57. This explicit mention of elevation corresponds symbolically with his middle position in the heavenly hierarchy, between man and God, between Enoch and Metatron, or the lesser Yahweh. In the fifth heaven we encounter Aaron, or Harun, brother of Moses and first high priest of the Israelites. His priestly role represents a significant development in organized religious practice. In the sixth heaven we reach Moses, or Musa, recipient of direct divine communication and the Torah. The hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari specifically notes that Moses wept when Muhammad passed him, explaining it was because more of Muhammad's followers would enter paradise than his own. In the seventh heaven, finally, we meet Abraham, or Ibrahim, the archetypal monotheist, whom the Quran calls Hanif, the Pure One. According to the hadith, Muhammad found him leaning against Al-Bayt al-Mamur, the celestial prototype of the Kaaba, visited by 70,000 angels daily. While the hadith collections confirm these encounters, it's important to distinguish between the authenticated narratives and later interpretations. The specific greetings exchanged between Muhammad and these prophets vary across different accounts and commentaries called tafsir, the symbolic interpretations of why each prophet occupies their specific heaven, developed through centuries of Islamic scholarship rather than appearing explicitly in the original hadith. What makes this ascension particularly significant for our exploration of seven is how it transforms astronomical knowledge into spiritual cosmology. The seven heavens, while rooted in the same ancient Middle Eastern astronomy that gave us the seven planets, become in this journey a comprehensive map of spiritual development. The sequence creates a symbolic progression from Adam, basic human consciousness, through increasingly perfected forms of prophetic experience, culminating in Abraham's perfect submission to divine will, the meaning of Islam, another complete spiritual curriculum embodied in celestial form. Ibn Arabi, the influential 12th century Sufi mystic, developed an extensive interpretation of the Miraj in his works, particularly the Meccan revelations, Al-Futuhat al-Makkiyah. He viewed each heaven as a specific spiritual state and prophetic quality that the seeker must internalize on the path to God, what Jung would call individuation. The sevenfold structure of this journey mirrors other septets we've explored, the seven planets, seven chakras, seven virtues, suggesting again how this number captures something fundamental about complete transformative processes. What's particularly striking is how this detailed sevenfold cosmology emerged in a tradition where the number seven already held special significance. The Quran itself references seven heavens, Saba Samawat, in multiple verses: 229, 1744, 2386, 4112, 6512, 67:3, 71:15, establishing a cosmic septenary that the Miraj narrative then populates with prophetic figures. In Jewish mysticism, a parallel concept emerges in the seven heavenly palaces, or Haikalot, Haikalvi. The Haikalot literature describes these palaces as concentric chambers, each guarded by angels and representing progressive stages of mystical ascent. The adept who wishes to make this journey must know specific passwords, seals, and purification rituals to pass through each gate. The 5th century text, Haikalot Rabati, describes this perilous spiritual journey. When he seeks to descend to the Merkaba, he calls to Surya, the Prince of the Presence, and adjures him 112 times. He may not add to the 112 times, nor diminish from them. If he adds or diminishes, his blood is upon his own head. The prince of the presence, or Surya, is none other than Metatron, or the lesser Yahweh. Such precise instructions remind us that these were lived mystical practices. Practitioners believed they could actually ascend through these realms through intense meditation, prayer, and mystical techniques, an experiential spirituality of the most profound kind. What distinguishes these heavenly realms from banal planetary spheres is their explicitly spiritual character. Each heaven becomes progressively more rarefied, more luminous, more vibrationally intense. The material gradually gives way to the immaterial, the temporal surrenders to the eternal. This sevenfold ascent mirrors the soul's journey toward divine union, from gross materiality to pure spirit. In Hinduism, the concept appears as the seven upper worlds, lokas: Bhur, Bhuva, Sva, Maha, Jnana, Tapa, and Satya. Each represents a higher level of consciousness and spiritual attainment. The Mundaka Upanishad describes these realms as increasingly subtler planes of existence, culminating in Satyaloka, the realm of absolute truth. Chapter 2, Section 1, Verse 8 writes, "From him, Mare born the seven pranas, the seven flames, their sevenfold fuel, the sevenfold oblation, and these seven lokas, where the pranas move, 7 and 7 in each living being lying in the cave, they're fixed." The persistence of 7 heavens across these diverse traditions points to something beyond cultural borrowing, despite other variations with other numbers. It suggests a shared intuition about cosmic structure again. Reality consists of discrete yet connected planes of existence arranged in hierarchical order, and that 7 perfectly captures this completeness. From Judaism to Islam, from Christianity to Hinduism, contemplatives who plumbed the depths of consciousness consistently returned with visions of sevenfold cosmic architecture. The medieval Jewish philosopher Maimonides attempted to harmonize this mystical cosmology with Aristotelian physics in his Guide for the Perplexed, suggesting the 7 heavens corresponded to the spheres of the Moon, Mercury, Venus, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, with the divine realm beyond. This integration of spiritual vision with astronomical observation exemplifies how the pattern of 7 bridged the scientific and the sacred. What's most remarkable about these 7 heavens is their function. They represent stages of spiritual ascent, levels of consciousness, degrees of proximity to divine reality. They map a trajectory of spiritual evolution. And isn't this the most profound pattern we've seen with 7? That it represents a dynamic journey from base to crown in the chakras, from sin to virtue in moral development, from grammar to astronomy in the liberal arts, and from earth to divine presence in the 7 heavens. In each case, 7 maps a complete journey of transformation, a sevenfold path that leads from the ordinary to the extraordinary, from the profane to the sacred, from ignorance to wisdom, from separation to union. And I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the 4 beasts saying, "Come and see." So begins the apocalyptic unveiling in the book of Revelation, where 7 seals secure a mysterious scroll that, when broken in sequence, herald the end of an age and the beginning of divine judgment. Here, 7 appears as a sequence of cosmic dissolution, as necessary destruction preceding a new creation. The 7 seals of Revelation represent one of the most dramatic and influential sevenfold patterns in Western consciousness. Even those who've never read the Bible are familiar with the imagery they unleashed: the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, earthquakes that move mountains, and stars falling from the sky. These seals changed the way the world saw the apocalypse, a world-ending catastrophe and a revelation, the literal meaning of apocalypse, that unveils a higher truth. The opening of each seal releases a specific event. The first seal releases a rider on a white horse, usually interpreted as conquest. The second seal brings a rider on a red horse who takes peace from the earth. The third seal summons a rider on a black horse carrying scales, representing famine. The fourth seal presents a rider on a pale horse, explicitly named as death. The fifth seal reveals the souls of martyrs crying for justice. The sixth seal triggers cosmic catastrophes, a great earthquake, the sun turning black, the moon becoming like blood. The seventh seal creates silence in heaven for about half an hour before introducing 7 angels with 7 trumpets. Notice how the pattern builds in intensity, moving from earthly calamities, war, famine, death, to cosmic upheaval, and finally to mysterious silence. A carefully orchestrated sequence, a divine deconstruction that mirrors the sevenfold creation. What makes the 7 seals particularly fascinating is their paradoxical nature. They simultaneously conceal and reveal. Each broken seal reveals catastrophe, yet also unveils divine purpose. The very word apocalypse, apocalypsis, means uncovering or revelation, suggesting that what appears as destruction is actually illumination. The breaking of each seal removes a veil of illusion, bringing us closer to ultimate reality. Early Christian commentators like Victorinus of Pettau, 3rd century, interpreted the seals as representing the entirety of salvation history. In his commentary on Revelation, he wrote, "And in the hand of the one sitting upon the judgment seat was a book, written on the inside, sealed with 7 seals. They signify the Old Testament, which is placed in the hand of our Lord, who has received judgment from the Father." For Victorinus, the opening of the seals represented Christ revealing the true meaning of Scripture and history, culminating in final judgment. Each broken seal unveiled another aspect of divine purpose working through human events. But the 7 seals penetrated far beyond theological circles, deep into our cultural imagination, appearing in everything from medieval art to modern cinema. Albrecht Dürer's famous woodcuts of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse brought these images to life with terrifying intensity, while countless writers, composers, and filmmakers have drawn on this sevenfold apocalyptic sequence. What's particularly striking is how these 7 seals function as meta-symbols. They represent the unveiling of meaning itself. Unlike the 7 planets or 7 virtues, which categorize existing phenomena, the 7 seals dramatize the process by which deeper reality is disclosed. They are symbols about symbolism, revelations about revelation, among the other septets presented in the Revelation. 7 churches, 7 spirits, 7 golden lampstands, 7 stars, 7 flaming torches, 7 horns, 7 eyes, 7 angels, 7 trumpets, 7,000 people, 7 heads, 7 diadem crowns, 7 heads, 7 final plagues, 7 golden bowls, 7 mountains, and 7 kings. The silence following the 7th seal is especially intriguing. After 6 seals of increasing catastrophe, the 7th brings not further destruction but half an hour of cosmic silence. This pregnant pause, this 7th moment, represents the threshold between endings and beginnings, between the dissolution of one world and the birth of another. This sacred 7th silence echoes the 7th day of creation, when God rested. The pattern of 7 once again captures a complete cycle, multiples, complete cycles, of cosmic structure and of cosmic time. The 7 seals mark the full arc from creation through destruction to recreation. A divine cycle reminiscent of the Hindu concept of creation, Brahma, preservation, Vishnu, and dissolution, Shiva, that prepares for new creation. Carl Jung offers a provocative counterpoint to these traditional interpretations of the 7 seals. In his answer to Job, Jung sees beyond theological symbolism to the human psyche beneath. Hereupon follows the opening of the book with 7 seals by the Lamb. The latter has put off the human features of the Ancient of Days and now appears in purely theriomorphic but monstrous form, like one of the many other horned animals in the book of Revelation. It has 7 eyes and 7 horns, and is therefore more like a ram than a lamb. Altogether, it must have looked pretty awful. Jung notes the startling transformation of the gentle sacrificial lamb into something aggressive and vengeful, with 7 eyes and 7 horns, mirroring the sevenfold pattern that permeates Revelation. This creature releases not divine judgment, but repressed human emotion. Jung continues, although it is described as standing, as though it had been slain, it does not behave at all like an innocent victim, but in a very lively manner indeed. From the first 4 seals, it lets loose the 4 sinister apocalyptic horsemen. What makes Jung's interpretation so compelling is his recognition that the 7 seals represent psychological processes. For Jung, the apocalyptic visions reflect the outburst of long pent-up negative feelings, such as can frequently be observed in people who strive for perfection. He suggests that the author of the Epistles of John had suppressed his negative emotions in pursuit of Christian virtues, only to have them erupt unconsciously in these violent visions. We can take it as certain that the author of the Epistles of John made every effort to practice what he preached to his fellow Christians. For this purpose, he had to shut out all negative feelings, and thanks to a helpful lack of self-reflection, he was able to forget them. But though they disappeared from the conscious level, they continued to rankle beneath the surface, and in the course of time spun an elaborate web of resentments and vengeful thoughts, which then burst upon consciousness in the form of a revelation. The seven seals become a framework for the complete expression of shadow material, the denied aspects of consciousness returning in sevenfold fullness. The progression from earthly calamities to cosmic dissolution to mysterious silence traces not just world-ending events, but the complete cycle of psychological integration. Jung highlights the contradiction between this vengeful vision and Christian values of love and forgiveness. A veritable orgy of hatred, wrath, vindictiveness, and blind destructive fury that revels in fantastic images of terror breaks out, and with blood and fire overwhelms a world which Christ had just endeavored to restore to the original state of innocence and loving communion with God. Yet within this contradiction, we find a truth about seven's role in human experience. Whether understood as divine revelation or psychological process, the seven seals represent a complete journey from one state of being to another. The Ouroboros closes a circle only to have other ones born again and again. The mysterious silence after the seventh seal takes on new meaning in Jung's interpretation. It becomes the necessary stillness after psychological catharsis, the quiet integration that follows the explosive return of repressed content. Whether these processes unfold in the cosmos, the body, moral development, education, or the depths of the human psyche, seven consistently remains the number that captures their fullness. The apocalyptic riders may gallop across the sky in divine judgment or across the meadows of our unconscious minds. Either way, they travel in patterns of seven, marking stages in a complete journey of dissolution and renewal. As above, so below, as without, so within. The macrocosm of cosmic judgment and the microcosm of psychological integration follow the same sevenfold path. Let's return to Earth. We arrive right in front of seven magnificent structures that captured the imagination of our ancestors. The seven wonders of the ancient world represent humanity's most audacious attempts to rival the gods through architectural genius. Yet another sevenfold pattern, this one celebrating human creativity rather than divine order. Unlike many septets we've explored that emerged organically from cosmic observation or psychological intuition, the seven wonders were a deliberate cultural creation, the world's first best of list. Ancient Greek tourists and travel writers compiled various lists of must-see monuments, which eventually crystallized into the canonical seven we know today. The definitive list, established around the 2nd century BC, included the Great Pyramid of Giza, the only wonder still standing today, with its perfect geometric form rising 481 feet or 146.6 meters above the desert sands. For nearly 4 millennia, it remained the tallest human-made structure on Earth as a testament to Egyptian technology and godly ambitions. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon, supposedly built by King Nebuchadnezzar II for his homesick wife Amytis, who longed for the greenery of her native Media. Cascading plants adorned terraced structures, creating a verdant paradise in the arid Mesopotamian plain, though whether these gardens truly existed remains debated. The Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, described by Antipater of Sidon as outshining the heavens themselves. I have set eyes on the wall of lofty Babylon, on which is a road for chariots, and the statue of Zeus by the Alpheus, and the Hanging Gardens, and the Colossus of the Sun, and the huge labor of the high pyramids, and the vast tomb of Mausolus. But when I saw the house of Artemis that mounted to the clouds, those other marvels lost their brilliancy, and I said, Lo, apart from Olympus, the sun never looked on aught so grand. The statue of Zeus at Olympia, a 40-foot-tall, seated figure crafted by the sculptor Phidias, depicting the king of gods in gold and ivory. So majestic was this statue that it was said anyone who died without seeing it had lived an incomplete life. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus, the massive tomb built for King Mausolus by his grief-stricken wife Artemisia, so impressive that mausoleum became our generic term for monumental tombs. The Colossus of Rhodes, a 108-foot bronze statue of the sun god Helios, straddling the harbour entrance, constructed from the melted-down weapons of a defeated invading army. Triumph transformed into awe-inspiring art. The lighthouse of Alexandria, standing over 330 feet tall, whose mirrored fire could be seen from ships 30 miles at sea, guiding ancient mariners safely to port. These 7 marvels are all different facets of human ambition. The pyramid embodies mathematical precision and immortal aspiration. The hanging gardens represent the conquest of nature. The temple and statue of Zeus express religious devotion. The mausoleum transforms grief into beauty. The Colossus demonstrates technological prowess, and the lighthouse serves practical human needs through ingenious design. Together, they form a complete picture of civilization's capabilities, a sevenfold achievement of mastery over stone, metal, light, water, space, scale, and beauty. Once again, 7 captures wholeness, this time of human rather than divine creation, but there's a melancholy aspect to this particular sept. Of these 7 glories, only the Great Pyramid remains. The others were destroyed by earthquakes, fires, wars, or the slow decay of neglect. They remind us that even our grandest creations are ultimately ephemeral, a humbling counterpoint to the eternal sevens of cosmic order. Greek historian Diodorus Siculus, writing about the pyramids, captured the tensions that surrounded these monumental achievements even in antiquity. It is generally agreed that these monuments far surpass all other constructions in Egypt, not only in their massiveness and cost, but also in the skill displayed by their builders. And they say that the architects of the monuments are more deserving of admiration than the kings who furnished the means for their execution. For in bringing their plans to completion, the former called upon their individual souls and their zeal for honor, but the latter only used the wealth which they had inherited and the grievous toil of other men. This remarkable passage redirects our admiration from the pharaohs who commissioned these wonders to the architects and laborers whose genius and toil actually created them. Diodorus recognizes that true wonder lies in the creative vision that shapes them. He continues by noting the historical controversies that already surrounded the pyramids in his time. But with regard to the pyramids, there is no complete agreement among either the inhabitants of the country or the historians, for according to some the kings mentioned above were their builders, according to others they were different kings. For instance, it is said that Armaeus built the largest, Amosis the second, and Inaros the third. And this last pyramid, some say, is the tomb of the courtesan Rhodopis, for some of the nomarchs became her lovers, as the account goes, and out of their passion for her carried the building through to completion as a joint undertaking. Here we see how even in ancient times, the origins of the pyramids were shrouded in competing narratives, some historical, others clearly legendary. The story of the pyramid built for the courtesan Rhodopis, a tale Herodotus also mentions but dismisses, shows how these monuments inspired not just awe but romantic imagination. What makes Diodorus's account particularly valuable is how it captures the human dimension behind these colossal structures. He reminds us that the 7 wonders were architectural, social, and political achievements, built through grievous toil and commemorated through stories that often challenged official narratives. This complex legacy reminds us that 7, as a pattern, structures not just the list of wonders themselves, but the complex human relationships that created them. Relationships between rulers and architects, between patrons and laborers, between builders and admirers, and between historical fact and mythic imagination. Despite their eventual destruction, the 7 wonders achieved a kind of immortality through our collective memory. They've inspired countless artistic works, architectural homages, and modern attempts to recreate their grandeur. They live on as archetypes of human achievement, as symbolic forms that continue to raise the standards of what's possible. In the Middle Ages, writers created new lists of 7 wonders, sometimes incorporating Christian sites like the Hagia Sophia. The Renaissance saw renewed interest in the ancient wonders, with artists producing speculative reconstructions. And the modern era has generated new lists, the 7 wonders of the modern world, the 7 natural wonders, and others, all preserving the sevenfold pattern established over 2 millennia ago. What compelled these ancient list-makers to settle on 7? They could have chosen 5 outstanding monuments, or 10 or 12, but 7 seemed the perfect balance again. And isn't it remarkable that even in this deliberately curated list, unlike the 7 planets or 7 notes that seem to arise from natural observation, the number 7 prevailed? It seems that even when ancient humans were creating entirely artificial categories, the pull towards sevenfold division remained strong. The 7 wonders remind us that the pattern of 7 may always be found in how we create within the world, how we build it, how we list it, and how we remember it. A generative principle that guides us forever. Imagine falling asleep and waking up centuries later to a transformed world. This haunting premise, familiar to us from countless science fiction stories, has ancient roots in the legend of the 7 sleepers of Ephesus, a tale that appears in both Christian and Islamic traditions with remarkable consistency. The story, first recorded in the 5th century and later included in Jacobus de Voragin's Golden Legend, tells of 7 young men living during the persecution of Christians under Emperor Decius around the year 250. Refusing to renounce their faith, these youths, traditionally named Maximian, Malchus, Marcion, Dionysius, John, Serapion, and Constantine, hid in a cave outside Ephesus. When imperial soldiers discovered their hideout, they sealed the cave with stones, condemning the young men to a slow death. But instead of perishing, the 7 fell into a divinely induced sleep that lasted nearly 2 centuries. During the reign of the Christian Emperor Theodosius II, around the year 447, a landowner reopened the cave, and the sleepers awoke, believing they had slept only a single night. One of them, Malchus, ventured into Ephesus to buy food and was astonished to find crosses adorning buildings and people freely practicing Christianity. When he attempted to pay with his ancient coins bearing Decius's image, suspicious shopkeepers thought he had discovered hidden treasure. The bewildered youth was brought before the bishop and emperor, who recognized the miracle for what it was, a divine sign of resurrection and eternal life. Having delivered their testimony to a now Christian world, the 7 promptly died natural deaths and were buried with honor. This legend spread widely throughout medieval Christendom, appearing in numerous texts, artworks, and even architectural details of churches. But what's particularly fascinating is its parallel inclusion in Islamic tradition. Surah 18 of the Quran, Al-Kahf, the cave, relates the story of the people of the cave who slept for 309 years. While not specifying their number, Islamic commentaries generally settled on 7 sleepers, plus their faithful dog, Kitmir, who guarded the cave entrance. The Quran relates, "You would have thought them awake, though they were asleep. We turned them over, to the right and the left, while their dog stretched his paws at the entrance. Had you looked at them, you would have fled from them, filled with terror." This cross-cultural preservation of the 7 sleepers story demonstrates how deeply this pattern was embedded in religious consciousness. Both Christian and Islamic traditions maintained the sevenfold number, revealing again it carried particular symbolic weight. But what makes this legend especially powerful is how it captures a universal human experience, the sensation of temporal dislocation, of feeling out of step with one's time. Haven't we all experienced moments when the world seems to have changed overnight, when we find ourselves suddenly strangers in a once familiar landscape? The 7 sleepers became powerful symbols of resurrection and cultural awakening. Their story addresses fundamental questions. How does faith persist through changing times? How do we maintain identity amid cultural transformation? What connects us to generations past and future? Some medieval Christians wore rings inscribed with the names of the seven sleepers as protection against illness or misfortune. The legend was so powerful that the Byzantine Emperor John VIII Palaeologus reportedly searched for their cave during his visit to Ephesus in the 5th century. In Islamic tradition, the seven sleepers' names were similarly used as talismans for protection, particularly for travelers. Ships sometimes bore their names as safeguards against storms, and mothers whispered them over sick children. The dog Kitmir received special veneration, with his name appearing on amulets and letters to ensure safe delivery. The persistence of seven in this story, not 5 sleepers, not 9, suggests again how this number captures a sense of completeness. 7 youths represent an entire community of faith. They embody the fullness of human response to divine calling, the complete spectrum of faithful witness. Archaeological evidence suggests the legend may have emerged from actual martyrs' tombs near Ephesus, with the sleep motif added as a metaphor for death and resurrection. By the 6th century, a church had been built over caves in the area, becoming a major pilgrimage site. The 7 sleepers had transformed from local martyrs to universal symbols. Carl Jung might have viewed the 7 sleepers as an archetypal expression of the death-rebirth pattern in the collective unconscious. Their unconscious state, neither fully dead nor fully alive, represents a liminal condition, a threshold between worlds that appears consistently in myths worldwide. The 7 sleepers remind us that the pattern of 7 extends to the way we structure stories that capture profound human experiences. Their tale forms a bridge between religious traditions, cultural epochs, and the timeless human experience of awakening to a changed world. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. So declares Jacques in Shakespeare's As You Like It, outlining perhaps the most famous sevenfold division of human life. His speech continues to map these ages. The infant mewling and puking in the nurse's arms, the whining schoolboy with shining morning face, the lover sighing like furnace and composing sonnets to his beloved's eyebrow, the soldier full of strange oaths seeking reputation, the justice in fair round belly with good cape on-lined, the aging man with spectacles on nose and pouch on side, and finally, second childishness and mere oblivion, sans teeth, sans eyes, sans taste, sans everything. Shakespeare's sevenfold life cycle brilliantly captures the complete arc of human existence, from helpless infancy to helpless senility, with the stages of growth, passion, ambition, authority, and decline between. Once again, 7 emerges as the perfect number to express completeness without excessive complexity. But Shakespeare didn't invent this pattern. His 7 ages draw on a tradition stretching back to classical antiquity. The Greek poet Solon, writing in the 6th century BC, divided life into 10 7-year periods. Hippocrates proposed 7 stages corresponding to physiological developments, and medieval thinkers, influenced by Ptolemy's work that we explored earlier, connected these life stages to the 7 planets, microcosm and macrocosm. The individual human life mirrors the celestial order, ascending through the same sevenfold pattern that structures the heavens. What makes these sevenfold divisions of life particularly valuable is how they capture both continuity and distinct transition. Life flows in continuous development, yet certain thresholds mark significant shifts in our physical, psychological, and social life. 7 provides enough divisions to mark these major transitions without fracturing the lifespan into too many segments. Different cultures have developed their own sevenfold divisions of life. In Hinduism, the traditional life cycle includes 7 ashrams or life stages, each with its own dharma or duty. The unborn child, Garbha, the student, Brahmacharya, the householder, Grihastha, the forest dweller, Vanaprastha, the hermit, Sannyasa, the yogi, and finally liberation, Moksha. Japanese tradition includes the ceremony of Shichigo-san, literally 753, celebrating children's growth at ages 3, 5, and 7, with 7 marking the important transition when children were traditionally allowed to let their hair grow out and wear adult-style kimono sashes. Shakespeare's poetic rendering captures the sense that we move through distinct roles on the stage of existence. His final stage, with its haunting repetition of sans, translated as without, reminds us of life's ultimate dissolution. Yet within this pattern lies dignity and completion. A life that passes through all 7 stages achieves a kind of wholeness, a full enactment of the human journey. The 7 ages of man represents another way sevenfold patterns structure temporal experience. They organize the flow of time into meaningful segments, helping us find coherence in the otherwise overwhelming continuum of existence that seems to have no clear delimitation. Psychological research offers interesting parallels to these traditional frameworks. Erik Erikson's influential theory of psychosocial development proposes 8 stages from infancy through old age. While not exactly matching traditional 7-age models, Erikson's work suggests that human development naturally falls into distinct phases, each with its characteristic challenges and growth opportunities. The recurrence of sevenfold life stage models across cultures and eras suggests something fundamental about how we experience the human journey. 7 seems to provide the optimal framework for mapping life's progressions. Enough divisions to capture major transitions, but not so many as to fragment the continuity of experience. As we grow from mewling infant to wise elder, we embody the same pattern that appears in rainbow colors, musical scales, and heavenly spheres. Each of us in our individual lifespan recapitulates the sevenfold structure that pervades reality at every level. Our personal journey through 7 ages connects us to the universal patterns that organize existence itself. And isn't that truly remarkable? Seven transcends explanation. It hovers at the edge of our understanding, not quite grasped by science, not fully articulated by mysticism, yet unmistakably present in the architecture of reality and consciousness alike. We've walked the paths of celestial and terrestrial, ancient and modern, sacred and profane. We've seen 7 emerge repeatedly as the perfect cipher for completeness in planetary bodies circling overhead, in the chakras ascending our spine, in virtues that elevate our character, in colors that paint our world, in notes that structure our music, in ages that mark our journey from cradle to grave. This is no coincidence, no mere cultural artifact, no cognitive trick of the mind. 7 is the number of initiation, the threshold where the visible meets the invisible, where matter touches spirit, where the finite brushes against the infinite. It stands at the crossroads of perception, the junction point where the universe becomes conscious of itself through us. What does this mean for your life? It means you exist within patterns of magnificent complexity and sublime elegance. Your personal dramas unfold against cosmic rhythms that have sculpted human experience since our ancestors first gazed skyward and inward with equal wonder. The same sevenfold structures that organize the heavens organize your consciousness, your moral development, your creative expression, your spiritual journey. You are not separate from these patterns, you embody them. When you understand that 7 represents completeness without excess, perfection without redundancy, you gain a template for balance in your own existence, neither too much nor too little. A midpoint between the one and the many, a perfect synthesis of unity and diversity. The wisdom traditions that have preserved these sevenfold systems aren't relics of superstition, but repositories of hard-won insight into the nature of reality and consciousness. They offer maps of territory that modern specialization often fragments, reconnecting domains we've artificially separated. Science from spirituality, art from mathematics, psychology from cosmology. I began this exploration with a promise that understanding 7 would change you. Now you see why. To recognize these patterns is to perceive connections where others see only separation, to see vividly order within apparent chaos, to sense profound coherence underlying the dizzying complexity of life. Fortunately, this recognition doesn't diminish scientific understanding. It enriches it. It doesn't replace rational inquiry. It complements it. It offers a parallax view, a stereoscopic vision that adds depth to our flat modernist picture of reality. The flame of this knowledge has been passed through countless generations, across civilizations, through dark ages and enlightenments alike. It burns not to consume, but to illuminate. And now it passes to you. What will you do with this flame? Will you let it guide you through the labyrinth? Will you use it to recognize the sacred geometry hidden in the corners of the mundane? Will you become a keeper of patterns, a guardian of connections, a cartographer of meaning? Think about that and come up with an answer that enriches your life. As always, I am Irrevelato. I have shown you the territories where 7 reigns supreme. But the map is not the journey. The pattern is not the experience. The number is not the mystery. If you want to support my mission, you already know how. But more importantly, the mystery awaits your exploration. Look for 7. Listen for 7. Feel for 7. It surrounds you, it structures you, it speaks through you. And in that recognition, you might discover that the universe is neither random nor deterministic, but rhythmic, pulsing with patterns that connect everything to everything else. As above, so below. As within, so without. This is not the end of our journey, but an ignition to begin your own, to see with new eyes, to hear with new ears, to understand with a mind awakened to the magnificent fractals of existence. 7 awaits you everywhere, in the days of your week, in the phases of your moon, in the notes of your favorite song, in the colors of light after rain, in the stages of your own unfolding life. The flame is yours now. Keep it alive, and remember, in a universe of infinite complexity, we are the way patterns recognize themselves. The sevenfold path opens now. Walk it with wonder.